Hello, everyone. Virtual Series session. Today, we're going to be dealing with our food systems track, and we will be exploring the priorities at the farm level. So to welcome you, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alois Mlanga. He's our Chief of Climate Technology and Innovation at UNIDO. So, Mr. Mlanga, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. I would want to welcome you to this session. My apologies, my video is sort of decided to have a brain of its own. I'm quite thrilled to moderate this session. UNIDO, in cooperation with the Vienna Energy Forum partners, namely the Austrian Development Agency, the Federal Ministry of European and International Affairs of the Republic of Austria, EASA, and FAO, have launched the VEF Series to examine the role of sustainable energy and innovation in driving development in end-user sectors like industry, food systems, and products. Today, we are launching the second session of the series on sustainable energy and food systems. This series looks at the nexus of food systems and energy, starting from the farm level. You are aware that the farm is where most food systems begin, and it is an integral part to provide proper nutrition to the growing population, as well as for development. As someone who grew up on a farm in my home country, I have first-hand experience on how some energy innovations have dramatically changed our operations for the better. The objective of the series is to collect the needs and critical issues preventing progress on the ground and identify key areas and solutions that can help in advancing action in high-impact countries. Therefore, we prepared the discussion paper that was circulated to you and is available on the VEF website. This discussion paper describes the main issues and methodology and criteria to be used for the identification of key countries where progress needs to happen. The outcome of the virtual series will help to launch a global program that will drive high priority actions on the ground. In addition, we will work on compiling a set of policy briefs that will feed into key global events in 2021. The inputs we get from this session will provide information into specific areas where sustainable energy interventions can best support farmers. By way of format, this session is arranged as following. We are going to begin with a scene-setting presentation. And after this presentation, we are going to have 4 breakout sessions. In each of these breakout sessions, we have 5 to 6 speakers and 1 moderator. These sessions will focus on the following. Session 1 will focus on global perspectives. Session 2 will focus on country voices. Session 3 will focus on enablers for progress. And session 4 will focus on data and evidence. After the scene-setting presentation, we will be going to the breakout sessions in respective rooms. All our speakers, please click on the breakout room where you were allocated. Then we'll come back to the plenary to hear from each of the group outcomes from the breakout sessions. With that, I would like to invite Mr. Rodney Miryuki from Inspira Farms to deliver the citizen presentation before we go to the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alois. Thank you for your kind words. Before we give the floor to Mr. Rodney Miryuki, he's going to be representing Inspira Farms. He requested to share a video as part of his presentation. So my colleague Emma is about to share her screen. If you see the video icon a little bit too small, make sure to double click on it and you should be able to see it. We hope you enjoy.
According to the Food and Agriculture arm of the United Nations, Cold chain development is an essential, integral element of growth in the food sector and needs to be better integrated into agriculture and food policies, strategies, and action plans. Inspira Farms produces energy-efficient pre-cooling, cold rooms, pack houses, and automated ripening chambers. The company prides itself in offering client-centered technical support and affordable asset financing terms that allow agri-businesses a step up to emerging technology and finance, allowing them to grow quicker within their business models.
We didn't have anything. We had a greenfield site and we needed a solution. So, there were many options on the table, but I was heartened by the response I got from Inspira Farms.
Inspira Farms really try to drive home the importance of first mile cooling, and that involves getting the cooling infrastructure as close to the point of production as possible.
With support of Inspira Farms and its partners, clients have improved the livelihood of over 5,000 rural community members across the developing world, including creating new jobs filled by women. Inspira Farms is revolutionizing the agricultural sector as they transform the global food industry, one agribusiness at a time.
We really do hold your hand through the whole process. We want you to have the best possible solution and the best technology available.
The facility is full of state-of-the-art high-tech features, including touchscreen controllers, automatic alarms for doors, yellow foam rollers, sensors for roller doors, intelligent humidifiers, and a weather station.
Glad to say that insofar as our cold chain is concerned with this unit behind me, we are very happy. We're wholly satisfied that we have a world-class system, and if we do expand, we will most definitely be going back to Inspira to take care of all our expansion requirements.
So thank you. I'll just start from the introduction. I still can't hear you, but I'm happy that you can. My name is Rodney Muriuki. I work with Inspira Farms and have been for the last couple of years. We work mainly in sub-Saharan Africa to provide post-harvest technologies, and especially at the first mile or at the farm level, where we are discussing today about priorities and how we can blend these with sustainable energy to be able to provide solutions for farmers, agribusinesses, entrepreneurs, people in the development world, investors, so that we can be able to proceed. Thank you, Emma. So for the next couple of minutes, I'll be painting the scenario and telling you more about our experience in the emerging markets with a specific focus on Africa. The photo you see in this slide was taken just about 2 years ago in Eastern Kenya. We were driving past, and upon stopping, we found out that the marketplace or the market price for tomatoes had actually dropped below the transportation costs, and the farmers had to figure out where to take the produce. I'd like to ask, how many of you work with farmers who often find themselves in this situation? I know, many of us. Food systems priorities at the farm level or at the first mile are 1, to reduce shrinkage, 2, to minimize produce loss, and 3, either to maintain or increase commercial value. The thing is, today's food system is highly energy dependent. Refrigeration is an unavoidable feature and happens to be the most energy intensive one. Greenhouse gas potential from produce losses is actually higher because they produce methane, which you know, or as some of you may know, has a higher greenhouse gas potential than carbon dioxide. And fossil fuels are the increasingly dominant energy source in food production and have negative impacts on food prices and climate change. The food sector consumes a significant chunk of the world's total energy consumption and consequently contributes to the total greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. There's an urgent need for food cold storage, technologies that are efficient, consume less energy, and are accessible at the farm level, because this has the potential to reduce farm-related operational costs and a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I usually say, if you'd like to make someone happy, as you can see in the photo, please give them an avocado, or even better, a ripe one. and you can actually see the smile under his mask. The photo is from an orchard in East Africa. Now, the first smile, like where this man finds himself in the farm, is the point where the produce enters the supply chain and its life cannot be sustained without access to energy. The value of fruit and vegetable exported from Africa was estimated to be at 44% of the world average value. Through prioritizing sustainable energy use at the farm level, we can bridge the gap by decreasing the value of the produce lost. In the post-harvest chain, or at the first mile, time is equal to shelf life is equal to money. So for every hour from picking or harvesting to cooling, not forgetting about the energy-intensive activities that are in production or the farming act itself, there is an impact of the number of days of shelf life. So first mile cooling increases the self-sellable volume of produce over the harvested volume. That means that the cost of production per unit of sold product goes down as a result. So why is it difficult for farmers to access energy-efficient cooling technology at the first mile? 1, limited access to finance, which we need to rethink because of the scale at which most of our farmers in emerging markets operate and the risk that naturally is attributed to farming. Number 2, challenges with access to energy, and I would say sustainable energy, especially in remote areas where most agricultural activity is concentrated in the emerging markets. So we need to explore innovative ways to bring energy and efficient technology to the first mile. Going over to the next slide, we're looking at what the opportunities are. And as we take this time to rethink, be innovative, brainstorm, first mile cooling increases the sellable output per unit of land through post-harvest reduction, which means more value, more revenues. First mile cooling reduces the losses through the chain from harvest to fork or to retail. Sustainable energy access and commercial supply chain integration, especially at the first mile. If we're able to put smallholder or outgrowers into commercial supply chains, it allows new models and builds chain transparency. In sub-Saharan Africa, such models through commercial businesses, agribusinesses, are bit valued through smallholder integration, which allows lump sum payments to farmers. For some of the clients that I've worked with in Rwanda, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, payments are made either bi-monthly or monthly. So that allows lump sum payments, increasing their access to credit and creating better livelihoods. But they cannot create better livelihoods if they cannot have the sellable volume or the sellable produce. So there's an urgent need to rethink technology and financial solutions to create the right environment to reach and serve large number of farmers and agribusinesses, especially in terms of physical access to energy, cold storage, and affordability. So through this, in our experience as Inspira Farms, we have managed to increase affordability, understanding the challenges and the risks of agribusinesses. We finance them up to 5 years. We increase efficiency up to 25% more energy efficient technology than some market players, and embracing sustainability. We aim at minimizing the losses by building the first mile, and we offer solar hybrid solutions for our product. So where's the impact and how should we go forward? Next slide, please. The impact of blending sustainable energy at the first mile is that it allows farmers, agribusinesses, entrepreneurs to do much better than they would with other solutions, reducing shrinkage, 1, extending shelf life, 2, and unlocking commercial value. And as a result, their return on investment is first higher and shorter than other solutions. By building infrastructure at the farm, we create opportunities in the rural context, not just at the farm level, but beyond. And by providing solar hybrid or renewable energy technologies, in some cases wind, or even hydro, and increasing the efficiency of the machinery, we then create a product that is compatible with some of the renewable energy technologies, thus reducing carbon footprint per kilogram of produce. So our call today is to create an enabling environment to make technology affordable, accessible, and scalable. And thank you, Emma, for playing the video. This would have been the point that you played the video, but thank you for that. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodney, so much for such an interesting presentation. So now I will tell everyone that it's time to go to the breakout room discussions. Now, to do that, there is a green icon to the left that says the series. You will click on that, and it's going to give you the 4 different breakout rooms. To our speakers, you know which one is your breakout room. To our participants, please feel free to virtually walk around our platform and select whichever interests you the most. And I wish you great discussions. Thank you so much for joining again.
So thank you all for joining this session, which is on the country voices. And perhaps before delving into the discussion, I would just like to have a brief introduction. Nice to meet those of you that I know, and to those who don't know me, my name is Rana. I'm the Chief of the Energy Systems and Infrastructure Division at UNIDO. So we work quite a lot on projects for rural electrification, supporting industrialization, and we've been working on organizing this virtual series. As part of the panel today, we have in the country voices a number of key experts, some that are coming more from the food systems perspective and some that are coming more from the energy perspective. So among us, we have Claudio Pedretti. Claudio is the president of the Alliance for Rural Electrification. Thank you for joining us, Claudio, and great to see you. We have Elle Gower. Elle is from a company called Greenpath Food, which is based in Ethiopia. Thanks for joining us, Elle. We have Huda Jaffer, and Huda is with the Selco Foundation. The Selco Foundation is known for its work on the productive uses of energy, and we're also very pleased to have you with us here today. Welcome, Huda. We have Hack Stirnblad. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So Hack is from a company called Sun Culture that does quite a lot of work on solar irrigation, particularly in Kenya. We're still waiting as well for Rodney, who's supposed to be joining us in the panel here as well, in addition to the scene setting presentation, and Brian Kavuma from Power for All, who's working also on off-grid electrification in Uganda. So with this, I would like to just kick us off with this discussion, which is really meant to capture more some of the progress that is happening on the ground, and also to capture the challenges, the missed opportunities, and what is it that we all need to collectively do to help achieve the SDGs collectively, SDG 7, as well as the SDGs on eliminating hunger, reducing food losses, and all that. So how can we collectively get there? And with that, I would like to kick off with the first question. And maybe I'll direct that to you, actually, Hack, as you work quite a lot on the farm level. So tell us about maybe some of the interventions and technologies that are at the moment being used at the farm level, and where you see are some of the challenges and opportunities on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's Sun Culture. We do solar powered irrigation technologies for smallholder farmers. We sell B2C in Kenya, and then we sell B2B through distributors in Uganda, Ethiopia, and now recently also Togo. So yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, we are a bit biased here, of course, of what interventions we are working on. But I would say that there are, of course, many interventions that is needed to increase the revenue and take farmers out of poverty. And I will also say that there's no really silver bullet today. This is a group effort, and there are many stakeholders that need to work together to reach these targets. But of course, essentially what it boils down to very often is water, inputs, and information and knowledge. And of course, on our side, we take the water part very seriously through our irrigation systems, solar-powered irrigation systems. So of course, what we have seen is that yes, it increases the harvest during the rainy season, but of course also enable farmers to increase a number of seasons per year and to be able to farm more high value crops, and also to be able to grow them during the dry season when the prices are higher. Of course, is a very important intervention. And then, of course, apart from that, we've also seen that access to water in household and for livestock is very, very key as well. We see that many of our farmers spend around 15 hours per week on collecting water to the household. So that's almost 2 working days per week, which is being released, which then can be spent on further working on the farm, growing more land or more high value crops, which is more work intensive. So that's also a great important step to take for them to increase their farm stock. And of course, we also should not forget the milk production and the livestock side of it. Many of the animals are receives too little water to be able to produce the milk or to grow the meat that is needed. So we see that as a very important intervention as well. So I think, yeah, I probably will stop there and let everyone and I'll speak. But of course, we firmly believe that irrigation is one of the key stepping stones to increase the farm productivity.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that. What do you think about this, Elle? I think you also work quite a lot at the farm level, and perhaps, I mean, an additional dimension to consider, particularly in your case, is reducing the food losses as well. So what is the perspective that Green Path Foods has on this?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Apologies in advance if my connection is poor. I'm in Addis at the moment and we've had a few days of rough connectivity. So as you say, at Green Path, we see...
So connectivity is cut off. So then I'll just move on to you, Huda, perhaps to give us the perspectives also from India and some of your works. Great. Yo, Kande. We hear you.
We hear you and see you.
Hi. Yeah, we hear you and see you very well. And time for me to then step to the back.
I think he's having some connectivity issues.
Yes, we hear you, Ikande. We hear you well. Do you see me? We hear you well. Perhaps, yeah, maybe Huda, if you want to give us the perspective of India, and I guess what he will hear us.
Hello.
I think Ellie is back as well.
Yes.
Hi, Candy. Can you hear us?
Hello.
No, I think we'll be doing this a while. The connection isn't holding up. Actually.
I think it's fine. So Ella, do you want to actually? No, we lost her. Huda.
Okay, I'll get started.
Yeah.
So yes, I just muted for the time being. So you can hear me, right?
Yes, we hear you well. And,
yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. And this is kind of one of the most critical sessions, I think, of the times that we're in. And at Selco, what we basically do is map out value chains, agri-allied value chains, and really look at the different technologies.
A month ago when I was able to join you, but today I couldn't join you. But I see a number of familiar faces of the topic. Topic is very important for developing countries. We need energy services, but we need energy services to help drive economic growth, agribusiness development, food security, access to clean water, and so on. And I'm very pleased that on your panel, you have practitioners from around the world, particularly some from Africa, who are applying some innovative energy solutions to boost productivity at the farm level, but also along the agribusiness value chain. In this regard, we need to scale up a lot of pilot projects that have been tried around the world for communities. We need to improve on business models that will make those interventions profitable. And in some cases, we need public finance to be able to help de-risk those investments that can go into applications of energy solutions for community development, but also particularly for the agri-food sector. The agri-food sector in a number of our countries is very climate sensitive, so there are major risks involved. To grow those markets, I am convinced that public finance in the form of some very smart subsidies to help the suppliers of, but also to help the uptake of relevant technologies that can actually use energy for production. So I wish you well. Unfortunately, due to technical problems, I can't stay on, but I just want to tell you that this session is right on the mark. As we look at the remaining 10 years to 2030, we need to have a nexus approach, building ecosystems of finance, technology deployment, and also some support services to entrepreneurs to be able to use energy for productive uses. All the best, and I wish you well for this session. Again, I apologize that for technical reasons, I can't stay on. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kande. Thank you.
Over to you, Rana.
To join us. Thank you.
Bye.
So let's hope that's the end of our technical difficulties. And now we have you back, Elle. So before we lose you, let's hear your perspectives and please get started.
Yeah, great. Sorry for getting cut off. So just to note, our business touches on lots of the topics that have already been mentioned. We work with small scale farms, we grow organically. Many of our farms rely on Hello Solar's pumps. We have a beautiful, large Inspira Farms pack house. So it's very nice to participate in a session where we're quite connected to lots of the other people in the room already. On my side, I think that one of the things which we are particularly enthused is pre-cooling, as Rodney touched upon in his presentation, for both reducing losses and the wasted energy that goes into growing food that then is not used. It's critical also for opening up small-scale farms to livelihoods opportunities. Really, really critical. That is one piece that we think about a lot. The other is going off-grid. So Ethiopia has an unstable grid, and providing our small-scale partner farms with access to energy, which is making sure that our systems are not reliant on the grid is critical for building resilience in our business, and therefore resilience in the services we offer to small-scale farms. And for that reason, I think that the interventions Rodney and Hack represent are both really, really interesting examples of the greater transformational impact of moving energy off-grid.
Excellent. Thanks, Elle, for sharing that. And what about how things are at the moment in India? Huda, you had started sharing with us before how critical the situation is at the moment. And perhaps you want to elaborate a bit also on what you guys are doing at the Selco Foundation.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much, Rana. So would echo a lot of the thoughts that have been said already. And just to add, one of the things that, Kande also spoke about was how do you look at value chains and disrupting value chains by using different energy efficiency or sustainable energy driven technologies. So what we do at the foundation is map out those value chains with experts and partners like yourselves and really kind of understand what role can mechanization and sustainable mechanization play to actually disrupt ownership models and financial models and add more value to the farm level. That's basically what we've been doing. And just to feed off some of the examples that have been said, but also some of the most critical technologies that we believe are really emerging as gaps. They mostly lie in three categories. One is mainly on the agri and horticulture stuff, and a lot of it has been spoken about in the form of post-harvest value add and post-harvest processing. to really kind of look at the farm level, right? But there is also scope on the transplanting side, the de-weeding side. So also the actual on-farm drudgerous processes during harvest and pre-harvest as well, there is opportunity. But of course, the biggest one lies in the post-harvest value add and processing. The second piece that I think Hack spoke about quite a bit was on the animal husbandry side. Here we see just an immense potential to kind of transform what is happening right now. So along with water, which is extremely critical, just to give you an example, in the dairy value chain, right from shaft cutters, your feed and fodder machines, your hydroponics, to your milking machines, your milk testing units, to the milk chillers, to your kind of last mile sweet meat making, all of those are actually really critical and very low hanging fruits when you're actually looking at transforming incomes at a dairy farmer level. So how do you really create those templates of businesses for small dairy farmers to grow from 4 cows to 20 cows to 50 cows? How do you really provide those templates for them to actually add value and grow, right? So animal husbandry, right from poultry, piggery, we actually find quite a huge potential to look at climate change within the animal husbandry value chains, along with the agri and horticulture. The third one where we find opportunity is also on the textile side, specifically on the cotton and silk, because those are actually have pretty heavy and drudgerous on-farm activities, right, from cotton picking to silk weaving and reeling and things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, some of the key technologies. Of course, the top ones being feed and fodder, veterinary services being accessible and actually viable at a last mile, and of course post-harvest, both mills, graders, as well as cold storage units, which has been spoken about by Rodney and others. I'll stop there, Anna. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's a really nice overview of many different technology ranges. And maybe speaking of off-grid electrification and also the role that it can play here in supporting this mechanization, Claudio, you've been a CEO of a company working in this field, and at the same time you represent a broad number of companies in the Alliance working on off-grid electrification. Where do you see some of the gaps and also the opportunities for making this nexus happen between basically the supply of electricity and also the demand that is coming from the farm level?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rana. As you mentioned it, I'm here representing mostly Alliance for Rural Electrification, which indeed represent 180 members, which are companies active in rural electrification. So directly working on SDG 7 and implicitly as well SDG number 2. So companies, association, NGOs, and many actors working in these fields. ARE is working to power rural economies and industries as agricultural source of livelihoods for 80%, 86% of the people living in rural areas. As a productive use of energy is a key focus for the Alliance. So this is really one of our main focus. And decentralized renewable energy offers great potential to solve global food system challenges with decentralized innovation that can increase agricultural outputs. Mm-hmm. Bringing the technologies that has been partly now already mentioned, like cold storage system to reduce food waste, and mechanize agro-processing. So to come quickly to your question, what energy intervention and technology present the most significant opportunities at farm level? We think that improving irrigation, cold storage, and agricultural yields will be imperative to reach our goal in order to eradicate hunger, and especially as climate change is projected to increase drought and extreme weather. So solar irrigation and water pumps is definitely one of the main topic from a technology point of view where energy can play a role and where most of our members are active. Because obviously water pumps can increase directly agricultural output. Cold storage system is drastically reducing food waste and preserving more food. And mechanized agro-processing is as well a very important topic, as distributed renewable energy is a direct activator of this kind of mechanized technologies.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. And I see we're losing, and we have back now Brian from Power for All. So thanks for joining us, Brian. I know that Power for All has done quite a lot of work in Uganda on supporting also electrification and this nexus with the food systems. So what experiences can you bring us from Uganda on perhaps not just the opportunities, but more the challenges that we still need to solve and the bottlenecks that stand in the way of upscaling, be it within Uganda or be it also across the board in Africa and other countries?
Yeah, I mean, thanks everybody. Sorry for the poor connection. As part of our global work, Power for All in Uganda is implementing a Powering Agriculture campaign. And what we're trying to do is work with partners in government, private sector, civil society, and the media to advance policy and fiscal support for productive use of decentralized renewable energy to scale, of course, like everyone has said, agriculture productivity and ensure food security. So a bit of context, Uganda is a country with 60% urban electrification and only 18% of rural electrification. So farm energy is either manual labor or is powered by diesel generators, water pumps, or chilling facilities. We've got dairy farmers in the southwest of the country, and from Monday to Sunday, January to December, they chill their milk using diesel-powered generators. Of course, we are all aware of the attendant negative environment effects and the fact that these often break down and have to be routinely serviced. So with this comes loss. Yeah, if a chilling plant is down for just 12 hours, the milk starts to go bad. So solar mini grids and standalone solar systems, in our view, provide affordability in the long run as well as durability. I mean, one of our partners is conducting a study, and part of their preliminary results shows that servicing a solar-powered milk cooling plant happens once a year. Now compare this to twice diesel-powered milk chilling or diesel-powered generator for milk chilling. So yeah, while introduction of sustainable energy at farm level, there's a need, of course, to examine the role of, the challenges that come with this. We have barriers like, access to finance. How do I get capital to be able to pay for equipment that I'm not very sure is going to return on the investment immediately? But then also in Uganda, we are seeing challenges that farmers are raising. They've been discouraged because the Uganda National Bureau of Standards has not really been supportive regarding calibrating or certifying some of these solar equipment. So farmers are shunning solar appliances because, once bitten, twice shy. I've bought equipment before and then it has failed on me. With time, I start to go back to the diesel-powered generators. But of course, regarding access to finance, the Ugandan government has established an agency, a statutory agency called Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company, and they're advancing credits for purchase of equipment, but also they're subsidizing the first connection for either standalone home systems or SMEs, the small and medium enterprises. So those that are engaged in agro-processing and the like. Of course, a lot has to be done regarding consumer education on the opportunities, but also selection of appropriate technologies for the different product value chain. I've talked about the milk chilling, but through our geospatial analysis, most of the maize milling plants are, of course, not surprisingly, located in the urban centers because this is where they have access either to the grid or a ready supply of diesel to power the generators. So we see a big opportunity for mini grids to power maize milling in the rural parts of Uganda. But of course, like I said, how do I realize a return on investment? How am I going to be patient while my investment bears fruit? And how am I going to pay off the credit? So government and their partners, of course, should consider.
Well, you're cutting off a bit, so I was just gonna actually try and already bring in some of our other speakers. If I look around the table, I see quite a lot of private sector participants from East Africa, particularly. And then also obviously Selco Foundation in India. And so my next question is actually more around what are the countries where you feel, there was good progress? And if, then what was the secret recipe for that progress? What can we learn to bring also to other countries around the world? And perhaps as well, especially from a private sector perspective, what do you need the government to do to be able to also invest capital or even raise, this access to finance that Brian also mentioned? How do we support de-risking and bringing the financial investments that are needed? So perhaps then maybe Huda, over to you to just tell us, where do you feel some of the countries that have done well, and then what is the secret recipe? And then we'll turn over to you, Rodney, to tell us maybe from a private sector perspective, and we'll continue the round. So Huda, over to you.
Thanks, Rana and Rodney. Completely agree with what's been said. Some of the challenges that you mentioned on the financing side and the scale piece of it. And I think as Brian correctly sort of identified that it's not just, technology, it's finance, it's training and capacity building, it's appropriate policies. The two aspects that we've seen which can sort of one of it is actually where, and you mentioned specifically the role of government within this, right? So one of them is really where, especially COVID and post-COVID, we've actually seen, opportunities to actually create sort of common facility centers, which are not necessarily, owned at a local level, but really come in as infrastructure finance. So it's the same way that we finance, airports and bridges and roads. It's, long-term infrastructure finance and create common facility centers for those key aspects which are not, which, you can't really own at a farm level at the moment, right? So I think within the next, if we need to meet SDG goals, that's one place where we see a good amount of, opportunity. The second piece also is where, we're actually building transaction costs for, one solution at a time. But when you're talking to the end users, whether it's self-help groups or joint liability groups or farmer producer groups or cooperatives, there is a huge opportunity to really, package solutions. So that last mile distribution piece, which really needs to be strengthened, and along with that, of course, awareness and capacity building, that is very critical. Because unfortunately, while we are saying that cold storages are very important and agri-processing is critical, we actually find a lot of systems that have been donated and they're lying unused, or they're not really used to their potential. So I think the criticality of really ensuring that the stakeholders involved in this know what it takes to get it working and to actually make sure that it is reaching its potential and its value add for the farmers. I think it's very critical to kind of bring in those two aspects. There are also places, Rana, where you have bankers and financiers that are ready, but you don't have the demand. We don't have the entrepreneurial mindsets. So you actually, it's never one versus the other, but it's always a combination of factors that need to work hand in hand to make it work.
Excellent, thanks, Huda. So over to you now, Rodney, to tell us, I mean, from your perspective, a company working in Kenya, what were those factors that helped you in making the market? What are the remaining challenges that are there? And where do you see the role of governments, perhaps, not just in Kenya, but that's what we're interested in here is more what lessons can we learn that also would be of application to other countries as well. And I would just like to, sorry, before you say, to our audience listening, any questions you have to the panelists, so please do post them in our panelists can interact directly with you, or I can also bring this to the session. So feel free to add additional questions. Sometimes we just get to be discussing among ourselves, but please, if you have any questions, post those. And now over to you, Rodney.
Great. Thank you, Rana. So questions, and thank you to all the other panelists for your contribution and so far. I think there are quite a number of countries where we work within East, South, and Western Africa that have tried to address these challenges. Some have used some similar approaches, including the strategies, and I'll give you maybe one or two or some countries where, in my opinion, they have succeeded. I think the first thing is to embrace a collaborative approach. The countries that have embraced these challenges have been able to succeed by doing this collaboratively. So through the private sector, the different civil society associations that have been created, and then the public sector and the development organizations that include the UN. Creation of enabling environments, especially for the private sector, enable us to get into these markets. For example, in East Africa, there is a zero duty according to the EAC, or the East African Community Incoterms, both of 2012 and 2017. So while these goods would have ordinarily attracted a duty of 25%, these goods come in duty-free. And up until this year, in Kenya, solar was VAT exempt. And between 2012 and 2020, we noticed an increase in the uptake of these technologies. And more so at the farm level. We have clients in East Africa who are doing flowers, who have put up to 1.4 megawatts of solar powered energy within their facilities, making their facilities, help reduce their greenhouse gas footprint. Also creating incentives for the private sector. When we move further down into Southern Africa, countries like Zambia, which are now creating policies for private sector players to get into the market in agriculture, agricultural implements, even in East Africa, are zero-rated tax. And this enables us, or enables private sector players, entrepreneurs, farmers, to be able to access these technologies and also give them, while embracing the quality, because it's also key. I think it was Brian who talked about sustainability and durability of this technology, to be able to provide to these businesses. And in terms of which countries, in my opinion, have succeeded so far, I think everyone is on their own journey. So there are some who are in a better position than others, while they have some significant milestones to their success. For example, in Rwanda, we have the Kigali Cooling Initiative, where some greenhouse gases, cooling gases, have been banned to be used in the country. And this is translated, within different countries which have signed the protocol. In South Africa, they have I think, to some extent, ban the use of some gases, reducing the carbon emissions or the greenhouse gas potential that these operations have on the environment. In Zimbabwe, they are creating the policies, especially as they try to revive the agricultural sector. Namibia as well, Zambia, and also Ethiopia. Ella will tell you a bit more about that, but every single country that we work in has recorded some level of success in achieving these goals. Thank you.
Oh, we can't hear you.
I hear you, Rana.
Rana, you're on.
Yes, I am back on. I was just actually directing the question to Claudio. We still have about 7 minutes to continue on this discussion, so maybe just brief interventions to allow everyone to get a second round as well. But the question is also, Claudio, more on where do you see some of the countries that have really succeeded in putting these kind of policy frameworks that are enabling on the ground, and that you feel also from a private sector perspective that can provide quite a good example for others as well to follow?
Yeah, Rana, we have mentioned that policy framework is one of the problems that in our case, the mini-grid developers that want to bring energy to rural places are facing, because obviously the importance of a well-done regulation is critical. There is no possibility to operate, or it's very difficult where there is no clear rules on how to bring electricity in the rural areas. Another very important problem is the access to finance, where obviously the technology are constantly decreasing their cost these days, but still the importance of grants is critical in order to be able to have a viable project in rural electrification. So I can mention a couple of very interesting approach that, for example, the World Bank is having in bringing in the same process of licensing, is bringing together licenses and finance. So if you take, for example, Nigeria, they have been doing an amazing job in this, and practically they are simplifying the life of those one who want to enter the business of rural electrification in the countries. So you can basically go into the countries with the operation, with the resources, and within the same application that you're doing in order to obtain license on the places that you were to work, if you succeed, you will obtain license to operate, I believe, for 15 or 20 years. And together with that, you're going to get the grant money. The same process. I think this is a very good example practical example of how to make access to energy and as well access to effective productive use possible. The same is happening in Haiti, for example, in almost the same way. And I hear something similar is happening in Benin and Togo, but I hope that this will become the standard in the future.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Claudio. And I'd like to turn to something that Huda said, but maybe ask your perspective, Elle, from Ethiopia. So Huda was saying that it's actually quite an interesting model, is more like this shared common facility centers, especially for farmers. And I know, at least from UNIDO's side, we do work on having in Ethiopia, particularly rural transformation centers. But I'll tell you a struggle that we are having, and it's actually more the business model to operate such centers, because they are offering common shared facilities and of course services that are very much needed for the farmers. So I don't know whether you working in Ethiopia, working on these issues, whether you actually do work on different business models, or if you have something to share in terms of recommendations or opportunities for making use of such kind of shared common facilities.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question.
You're muted. Maybe you just,
back. Yeah, nice. So yeah, it's a nice question in that it does very much fit our model. So we work with just coming up to 300 small-scale farms who are all within 10 kilometers of our farmers service center. And from that base, we provide them with the inputs to use as part of their planting and rotation plan for their farm. We provide them with agronomic advice. So we have a team of agronomic experts who can serve those farms at a much higher ratio than the government is able to. And then we also provide connecting services into support when it comes to things like. And then finally, when that product is ready to harvest, it moves through our pack house and on for distribution both locally in Ethiopia and in the export markets. And I think that in terms of kind of lessons learned, I think what Huda said about the importance of making sure that you then have the follow through on the market side is really, really important. I went to visit a union yesterday where they have really quite impressive facilities supported by grant money. And they said that the problem they face is that they're only able to actually market about 10% of the crop that the farms feeding into their union grow. And it's a complicated one, and there are very good reasons why NGOs and public institutions are nervous about touching private sector market linkages. But I really think that where organizations can act as a facilitator and facilitate good networking between producers, especially those who are taking an aggregating role, and then onto the market beyond, I think that's a really, really important thing. And I certainly see it in Ethiopia. You know, UNIDO has fantastic projects in this country on prickly pear and on moringa. But my understanding in both is that a large part of the challenge is about then finding sustainable markets for that product. And so it really resonates what I heard before about that being a very, very important part for us all to be thinking about. It's kind of easier to point to the physical infrastructure pieces necessary to build a farmer service center, but the more intangible but critical market linkages beyond that, I think are important for us to start thinking of solutions to.
Excellent. I mean, I can go on and on. There's so much knowledge in this group and a very interesting discussion. We just have to return back to plenary. So I'll just ask each one of you to tell me one word that you feel is relevant to take back to plenary, as I have to report back. And we'll start with you, Hak, since you haven't actually gotten to take a second round. One word. Can be 2 syllables of one word, but just one.
Can I say financial incentives? That's 2, but yeah.
Financial incentives. Okay, great. Rodney.
Energy accessibility.
Energy accessibility. Okay. Brian. Policy support. Claudio.
I would say yes, access to finance, grant, but bound with regulatory framework. Rana, can I add something very quickly?
Sure,
very quickly. I wanted Thank you. I wanted to remind that ARE and UNIDO ITPO are working together on a paper, and we are collecting case studies. So perhaps some of the people that are connected, they want to get in touch.
Sure. I think Michael did already the sales pitch for that in the main session. Huda, help me with the one final word.
Decentralization.
Decentralization. Okay, fantastic. Thank you all so much.
Okay, so hello everybody. I have the pleasure and the honor to chair this session. We're a bit tight with time, so we have 3 questions to answer. We have, 45 minutes. And so I will just quickly cite basically our panelists, and then we can start with the first question. So we have Thomas André from REN 21. We have Alice Uwamalia, SEforALL, sorry for mispronunciation maybe. Martin van Dam from SNV. Cherub Soy, she's a thematic focal point of energy access as SDG Youth Constituency, and Alexander Hack, NDEV. So welcome to this working group session, and we will start with the first question. We have basically 15 minutes per question for discussing and wrapping up. So the first question is, which countries offer the best examples of how to introduce sustainable energy at farm level on a large scale? So nice examples in the introduction. So who wants to start with concrete examples?
Can I start?
Yes, Cherub, please go ahead.
So hello everyone, and the countries that offer the best examples, I am going to give an example of Kenya, which is where I come from, and which is the video we saw on the main session by Rodney. So I did say Kenya because I know we are talking about food farming, but I will give an example of horticulture because it's closely related, and I would give an example about the Syrian flower farm, which is an excellent one on how sustainable energy can work at a large scale farming, as it is the largest flower farm here in Kenya, and 1 million flowers per day to Europe and North America. And what's amazing about the flower farm is that it is not only the largest grower of roses in the country, but also the world's largest geothermal powered greenhouse and flower packed house. It uses geothermal heating, which is beneficial in many ways, like it can manage certain diseases and minimize the use of pesticides. Also, the farm can grow exclusive specialty roses like the Queen of Africa and Vuvuzela, which require heating that would have not been possible under different heating systems. The farm also introduced electric cars known as tugs that are powered by geothermal to transport the flowers from the greenhouses to the pack houses, and also introduced hybrid sheep to mow the lawns and replace diesel lawnmowers. And then for transportation, the flowers they use a new technology known as Cargolite, which is a flower packing technology, which is lighter and saves on airspace and air freight costs. And in a nutshell, I feel like it's a great example on how sustainable energy can be used from production. Yeah.
Okay, good example. To start with, anybody wants to add something?
Yes, sorry.
Thomas.
All right, thank you. Yes, to continue with what Cherub said, I think that's interesting to take an energy perspective, and more specifically a renewable energy perspective. If we look at the fact that let's say at the global level, industry and agriculture represent about 35% of the total energy we consume. We do have in industry and agriculture thermal energy representing 75%. If we go down to only agriculture, so that represents about 2% of global energy consumption. And in this specific sector, we have 73% of the energy consumed through the form of heat. And this is why also I wanted to complement what Cherub said. I think selecting countries that already have developed the use of thermal energy as in terms of resources might be a good first starting point. And if we look at Africa, we have diversified or other developing countries, we have a diversified set of renewable energy sources that we can rely on. Geothermal is definitely one for greenhouse heating, aquaculture, drying. We could think also of solar thermal, which is not very much used in the agricultural sector, but that can be definitely mobilized. And other renewable energy sources, obviously solar, PV when it comes at electricity is a must, but let's also think about hydropower, because it will have an implication for over irrigation, and that has to be taken into account to not have let's say, an effect on the downstream energy production, or just simply.
Okay, Thomas, we need examples of countries, so maybe we'll move to another person who has examples of countries. Yes, Martin. Martin, and then Alex.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was also a bit looking to the question from another angle, not specifically large farms, but more large scale, and introducing renewable energy solutions on a large scale in terms of numbers. And there are a number of countries where also with SNV, but also other parties have been working in the biodigester sector, for example, in Nepal, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Kenya, in Burkina, Ethiopia, where in total over 700,000 small-scale farmers now have a biodigester on their farm, which gives them energy for cooking, but which also gives them a good compost, which improves their sanitation, etc. So I would also like to focus the discussion maybe a bit more on the small-scale farms instead of these large farming solutions.
Okay, we have solutions. I think we need solutions for every type of farm. And okay, Alexander, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks also to Martin, who already introduced a couple of my speaking points actually when talking about biodigesters, because I truly think that's, I mean, you can basically use a byproduct, no? And we did that also together with SNV in a couple of countries, especially in Asia, also, for example, the byproducts of farmers, you know, that hold pigs, for example, or even shrimp farms. And I think it's important that we really try approach-wise to think not in a silo, not in an energy silo, what maybe INDEF also sometimes used to, and then others from another silo, but think about the end user. What does the farmer need? And it, of course, it's not only energy at the end of the day. You know, they would also need fertilizer. So thinking about bioslurry, of course, also I think makes tremendous sense, because then the farmer doesn't only have access to energy, ideally in the end, but he will also have a product that increases his yield, no? Because he has bioslurry, which he basically can use. Another, I think, good example right now, and also focusing in a little bit on the small scale farmers, is solar irrigation, definitely for farming. There are, of course, also some challenges, I would say, to it for very small farmers. The technology is still a little bit expensive. You would need to look for some kind of farmer associations or something, cooperatives maybe, that then can actually purchase this equipment. Bigger farmers anyways, I think, can do it already. But I think with solar irrigation also, we are right now approaching, and let's say technology cost-wise also a curve that really has the potential to really transform the farming landscape in a lot of countries, because it's cheap and it's accessible and it's pretty easy to use as well. So these two, let's say, technology examples, so biodigester, slurry, and then also solar irrigation, I think would be one of the most, let's say, most important technologies. And then country-wise, I don't really have a specific country right now in mind. Actually, it depends very much on the regional setting, of course, geography, you know, climate and the surrounding conditions. But I think as such, in almost all the countries that we now are talking about, you have tremendous potential that we definitely would need to leverage in the future.
Okay.
Thanks.
Alice, would you like to add something on this first question? Yes.
Yes, maybe very quickly, and thank you. Apologies for my camera, which was not working earlier. No, so I think for SEforALL, we focus mostly on access to cooling when it comes to food systems. And we think about upcoming, with global warming, the upcoming rising temperatures, coupled with the population growth. So we've seen that, for instance, India has just, I think for the last 2 years, come up with a national cooling plan, where within that plan, they start already to think about the rural farmers and how the different policies and measures to take into account the consequences that the rise in temperatures will have on agriculture, and specifically for rural farmers and vulnerable people. So I think in terms of countries and also what to think about when talking about these points, I would like to highlight the work that India has been doing regarding to access to cooling and agriculture.
So basically, we have lots of solutions, small scale, large scale, different technologies, depending on the circumstances. But I think that we have some challenges in terms of finance, but also maybe in terms of the technology sometimes. Although this might not be the bigger one. This leads me to the second question now, which is actually what strategies were employed to make these successful examples work. So it could be at the farm level, but it could be at the country level. If you don't know about good strategies, you can tell me about big challenges. You can tell us about big challenges.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please,
Thomas. Yes, I think what our colleague from Inspira Farm told us is that added value needs to be bring back at the farm level to focus on post-harvest processing to really make sure that at the farm level you will have more added value, as a way also to make sure that farmers will have more price negotiation power, that links will be done in between farmers and the food and beverage multinational companies, but also the local value chains here for food and beverage. And I've seen Rwanda and Ethiopia being cited as good examples. Both public and private sectors players focusing on building those local agri-markets and creating more local value added at the farm level.
Okay. At the end, I might have to change my hat of moderator to resource person, but I'll first let you go ahead. Other interesting aspect, yes, in strengthen the farmer power by adding value and also cooperatives for a negotiation power vis-a-vis the other players in the chain. Interesting. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, another one is, I think, the issue of finance. It was touched upon already in the introductory and plenary presentation here, and someone mentioned it in this round already. So trying to facilitate access to finance or also kickstart with some initial grant funding, I think, is one of the obvious instruments at hand also, and it has also been, I think, working out quite effectively in a number of cases. So, be it grants to sector associations, or be it support to suppliers of technology via results-based financing instruments and stuff like that. I think that definitely has proven to be successful in a number of cases. Potentially, I'm saying something that Martin also will pick up in a couple of minutes from now. But I think in Cambodia, we also, with the help of SNV, also managed to implement a PAYGO system basically for biodigesters. No, I think that's a very interesting approach that you managed to implement there. Probably it's one of the first of its kind in this sector, at least worldwide, where people basically, they get the biodigester and then they pay kind of back in installments as they use it. No, so trying to also de-risk upfront for the farmers. Try to see who can actually take over the risk. Can we maybe leverage that somewhere else and not at the farmers level? I think that's very important to get rid of the risk, to not put the farmer, let's say, upfront at the highest risk levels. Then let's say lessons learned. You were also asking about things that maybe were not running too well, and I think in Ghana we worked a couple of years ago on solar irrigation with the help of photovoltaic, and in the end we learned definitely that at that point in time the prices were still too high for small scale farmers to actually purchase that equipment and then to get a return of investment in a reasonable period of time. So for bigger farmers, it's kind of a no-brainer. At least in Ghana, you know, it's relatively easy and straightforward. But if you really are trying to address livelihoods, then you would need to go to the small scale, to the horticulture farmers, basically. And there it is a challenge. So there you definitely need to think about, can you pool somehow with the associations, you know, with cooperatives, or can you use some of the finance instruments to bring down the price, basically, so that they become affordable for the small scale farmers as well. So I would say that's definitely also a challenge still.
Okay, Martin.
Yes. So yes, indeed, the access to finance is a big challenge, and you also have to look at the business cases. And for biodigesters, for example, once it started as biogas, and we prefer, say, biodigester because it has all these other benefits. And if you look at the biodigester, for example, here in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, with a biodigester that would cost you 500 euros, you can get about 20 tons of compost, and 1 ton of biocompost sells at 60 euros. So that means that even if you sell half of it, and the other half you use on the farm, within 1 year you have return on investment. But it's very difficult to get third parties to have to finance the smallholders. At the same time, you also have to look at the business case of the companies, and then it depends. You have these big companies with the prefabs, but you also have these mason companies who do the domes, and they also need finance. And what is happening in terms of lessons learned also in biodigester programs is that everybody tries to get the price of the end user lowest as possible. And so they are a bit squeezing out the suppliers, and while the business case for the small is quite good. So that's also maybe a lesson learned to not to intervene too much into the market there, also with regulations and these kind of things. But also there is a big issue.
Okay, now just to say on this thing, I think the business case of the supplier of the energy, if you take kind of off-grid energy and all the supplies of the material, it improves if the farmer business case improves, because then the farmer can pay a better price for the energy. Mm-hmm. So I think this is where also linking the energy business, the supplier business case to the farmer business case is important. They need to talk to each other. And this is an approach which I think is very interesting. Anyway, I'm talking too much because I should just moderate, but I have something else to add is separating. What do you think about separating for the biogas? If the farmer does everything, it may be too complicated. And sometimes the biogas doesn't work well. In China, you have village level biogas, which supply the biogas to the farmers. And so you separate the biogas making from farming, which I think we might think about it, because maybe the farmer is not so good at producing the biogas. But that's just thinking that we are exploring, and we don't have, unfortunately, time enough to discuss that. But maybe our two ladies, they would like to add something on the strategies for making things work.
Yeah, I would like, most of the stuff have been mentioned, but I would like to add on the capacity building from the bottom up. As much as the sustainable energy is being introduced into the farm level, I think it's also important to introduce capacity building to the farmers who are receiving this sustainable energy and giving them a wide variety of what technologies they would use and what would be helpful for them. And also, as I'm coming from a youth perspective, this would also create employment for the youth and the women, which is essential in this conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Alice? Yeah. Any thoughts?
No, my thoughts, I think, coming again from more of the cooling side and from the SEforALL side, I think that for us it would be very helpful. I think we've noticed that there are still a huge lack of data to understand certain area of this sector. We still, for instance, again, when we go into the rural and small-scale farmers, I think there still are some data that are lacking that will be able to enrich this conversation, especially when it comes to infrastructure level. There's a lack of data when it comes to what type of infrastructure is available to this type of vulnerable population, especially for storage and also goods, which at the end of the day, if we have a bigger picture, we could also understand what type of measures will be able to be implemented to enable them to access a larger market, and also, again, going back to the income level, increasing their income. So I think that's what...
I think I would like to... Sorry.
No,
I would like to pick up on what you just said, Alice, because I think there's a lack of data on mapping out at the country level, even at provincial level, the links between farming and energy access. I'm saying this because I saw recently very interesting work by an NGO called Power for All, where they map out the access to energy with the existing of maize milling units. It's all fine to produce a lot of food, but if you cannot process it, then there's no point. You lose a lot beyond the farm. Today, I know it's the farm level, but we need to, next sessions will be beyond that. But I think mapping out these linkages between where you find energy, where you find possibilities to increase the yields or add value to the farming products, and then say, well, where the gaps are, this is where you may need off-grid energy. And you are perfectly right. We don't have enough information on that. We have cases, piecemeal experience, but we don't have enough data, enough information at country level. And I think this is something that we should maybe highlight if you agree, because my own experience is that FAO, we go to a country and we don't have this information. So I think it would be great if, I mean, from REN, from all the organizations that do the data gathering, we could highlight this link, the need for making the links, mapping out the links between agriculture and energy access.
You are absolutely right.
Anyway, okay.
And this is also
okay.
This is where the geographical information systems will make we can make the most of those tools. I know the World Bank has been using it for planning electrification of some countries, but you mentioned this study done by Rebecca Shirley. It's a must read, let's say. And in this topic of rapid deployment of energy infrastructures, there's also, beyond this planning and making sure that we can overlay agriculture and energy, there's also maybe a question also on retrofitting, because we can see a lot of combustion engine electric motors being used by cooperatives, by farms, etc. If we turn to more modern types of energy provision plants like mini grids based on solar, we might need to turn to electric motors. And that is also linked to the question that Cherub was bringing on technical support, technical training.
Yes, absolutely. So we need training not only on the farming, but also I think on the energy, but also honestly on the soft aspects of things, software set, not the hardware, but you know, the association, cooperatives, all those things to strengthen farmer power and the whole management of these cooperatives or farmers associations. Anyway, now we're moving slowly to the third. If you don't have any glaring thing to add, I don't see anything in the chat that we have questions, but so we can move slowly to the third question, which is basically how can international organizations work together to create this famous suitable enabling environment for the introduction of sustainable energy. I like to say sustainable, affordable, and reliable energy at the farm level. So if you have experience of working with other organizations and so on, then please bring them along, because this is the kind of thing that we could build on for our discussion.
Okay.
Yes, Martin.
Yes, so I think there is a bit of well, a silo structure, so to say, that you have the agricultural organizations and you have the energy organizations, and I think there must be much more interaction between them. At SNV, we have several of these that we are trying. It's not easy because well, they are structures and it's not always easy to get through them. But for example, we work with IFTC on the food scale program, where we try to also bring in energy in agri value chains. With Helvetas, we do something. There are some others I don't know all done by heart. But I think it's very important also for donors, because also with donors, they sometimes say, well, no, we do agriculture, and then you propose an energy solution in agriculture value chain, but then they see it as energy. And so I think it should be much more approached, much more holistically and pragmatically, and well, that demands a bit of flexibility with many organizations, and maybe put yourself also in question. What do we want, and do we want to go a bit in the niche markets or not?
Can I add on that one, Olivier?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because so honestly, for me, the question, I think maybe it's not really clear for me, because of course, yes, you need to partner with other internationals, for example, operating in that field. And I think, I mean, the ones of us who are implementing on the ground, we do that all the time. I mean, we talk to Power Africa, we talk to all the other internationals. We are in contact with SEforALL. So I think there is already a lot of cooperation actually ongoing. Yeah, and maybe what we would need is to have something on a global scale that actually is able to condense that data that is actually there on the ground. Someone who's, let's say, centrally also collecting that data and trying to display that data. So it could be, for example, then be REN21 or I don't know, SEforALL, for example, to try to track progress in that sector as such. But I think on the ground there's already a lot of cooperation ongoing, and that's anyways. If you're an implementer, all your donors will tell you don't duplicate. You know, all your donors will have a mandatory requirement that you also try to talk to the other implementers on the ground, to other donors, to other bigger projects and programs. And so I feel there's already a lot of cooperation, let's say going on. But what I really liked about Martin's intervention was to say, let's try to stop thinking in silos. And that, of course, is still predominant. We think very much from an energy silo, no? And others are coming very much from an agriculture silo, saying, okay, we need to preserve food, for example, but they don't think about what actually is required. And so who should be in the focus of all of this debate? That should be the end user, no, in modern term speech. So basically that would be the farmer, and we will need to understand what does the farmer actually need? What are the needs? It's not only energy, you know, it's not only water, and it's not only finance. And then we will need to see how can we address these needs best, of course, in an approach that is not, let's say, linear, but that includes different sectors. I think that's the challenge going forward, to combine these different work trajectories that we have now already, because we can leverage much more with that synergy, basically. You know, I know it sounds like the normal stuff that you would say, but I think here in the agriculture sector, it's really exciting, because you really can make a difference if you try to pool together better these different, let's say, trajectories that are out there already. And of course, the different dissemination of knowledge is key. That's why I think this webinar is really great, and what Power for All has been doing is also great. So try to talk more about what works and what is not working, and condense that somewhere and make it available to the whole world. I think that's really very important moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so you pointed to SEforALL. So Alice, you're a bit on the spot here. Do you think SEforALL might envisage to become the repository of energy/ag or food information? FAO could also probably contribute to that, because by the way, something that I think is interesting is to make the case is important. And you know, there's a forthcoming November next year. There's a big food summit, international food summit. So I think from our side, from the energy group side here in FAO, we're trying to make the case of the energy ag links. But I think we can all do our work here. Another thing that I wanted to mention, again, speaking from a bit of experience, is there are some levers, key words that, I mean, the energy in reducing food losses will sensitize people. The whole business case of the farmer linking to the business case of the energy companies. We have been approached in FAO by energy companies because, as I said, their business case is improved if the farmer business case is improved. The whole greening of food chains, the whole climate change. I mean, of course, as Alex said, it's not easy, but there are some aspects which are important. And last but not least, the whole linked to pandemics. And because if you have energy for food, you can also use part of that energy system for health centers to pump good quality water. So all these aspects which integrate, it's several nexuses, but I think it's important. Also, what some of you mentioned is the whole issue of the byproducts. The byproducts of one can be used for the other, the biofertilizer from biogas and things like that. So I think the big challenge is on the ground. Yes, of course we collaborate, we go and we try not to duplicate, but to change gears, I would say, to really, we need to do that at a more global level, to have a repository of data or a forum for these kind of things. And I think, honestly, from FAO side, we are scratching our heads on how to achieve that. Just to say, SEforALL, maybe you can do it, but I mean, we can join forces on how to achieve that and make the case, actually, for the need for information and data and collaboration.
No, definitely. And I also 100% agree with what Alexander just mentioned. I think there is a need for a stronger coordination. I think from SEforALL, we'll be happy to take the lead on that, given that I think for us, we'll kind of see ourselves more as the energy part, but we'll still need someone, who will be the food and agriculture system, let's say, expert to help us guide through this topic. And I also wanted to also acknowledge the UNIDO for organizing this topic. I think this is a really good conversation to be had. And as we can see, this is a topic that really, we needed to have this conversation and start and to start mapping what can be done and how we can create a better coordination. And I just also wanted to add that I've seen some other organization that maybe I haven't seen throughout this speakers list, but I know that WWF UK is doing a good job trying to map case studies for fisheries in East Africa. We're working with them on that. And the World Bank was also working on a roadmap for cooling, but where they do take into account agriculture as well. So I think there are some of these major organizations who are somehow small starting to think about this, and it would also be great to start getting in touch with them and then seeing if, I think this is always an interesting topic, this nexus, and then approach them and see how we can collaborate with them as well.
Maybe another good source is the Power for All campaign, Powering Agriculture, and their PEAK platform.
Yes.
Because they have been already gathering some good case studies on the ground. I think that's important to take case studies that will speak to countries which have the same situations, contexts.
There's also, if I may, it's led by Germany. I don't know which organization in Germany. I think it's GIZ. Alex, you can tell me. It's the Water, Energy, Food Nexus Knowledge Platform, which I think is yes, maybe. I know it's led by a German organization. I don't know which one now.
Yeah.
But I think what is needed also, we spoke very often, it hinges on really the financing mechanisms. Grants is great, but at some stage you need to move to a market approach. And so innovation in financing, so gathering experience and be able to draw lessons from these financing schemes, I think would really help a lot. And there, and there are some interesting experiences out there. So the whole mapping, the whole not working in silos, and the whole financing. So we need to collect this information and draw lessons, which is a huge challenge. But I think if we don't do that, it will be difficult to move beyond, well, to shift gear, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So of course there's the Water Energy Food Nexus platform, and of course there are also several others out there, and that's again the challenge. Then also you have different platforms, no? So I think it would be really good if you would have one organization, let's say, who could be the the one-stop shop for information on that matter, so that people don't need to search 10 or 20 or even more different platforms and websites. You know how it is these days. So that would, I think, that would definitely help. Yeah. Also because from a program logic, normally these projects, they tend to end at some point in time. So in 3 years, maybe there won't be any platform anymore, or there is still a platform, but it's kind of dead because nobody's updating it since 3 years, and then nobody's looking at it. So, finding an actor who, on a long-term, let's say, perspective, is able to operate that, to manage that, of course, who also has to have the resources, because of course it's costly to manage all of that. I think would definitely be helpful, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are back again. Okay. I don't see any questions from the audience. If you want to raise your hand or write a question in the chat, or Cherub, you wanted to add something on this topic?
It's a very general, but I just wanted to say thank you for including the youth voice in this nexus and in this conversation, because many a times we are forgotten. So
no, you are absolutely part of the nexus. All right. So I think we are a bit in advance. I look at my watch, and we're supposed to go back at 3 o'clock. So if you want to add something, Thomas, you mentioned this study. Maybe if because I don't have access to it, maybe I can, if you can share the link with the Power for All. It's actually, just to say, it's a study that was done to map out, as I said, in Uganda, the links between access to energy and the existing of milling units. And of course, most of the big milling units are where there is the grid energy. But then they also mapped out where there's potential to increase the maize yield. And that's where, and you don't have the grid energy. And obviously that's where, for example, you can say this is the biggest potential, the added value of introducing off-grid energy. They also did it for other crops, for which maybe this is not that obvious. I'm thinking of maybe perennial, but I mean perishable ones, for example, is for me is obvious. We saw that in the video. So right, but
Can I add one thing here, Olivier? Because this brings to my mind, we also worked with these mills a while ago, but then we also figured out that actually there's quite a big gap when it comes to the quality of these kind of technologies. Not every mill, is suited for, I don't know, an environment that's very humid, for example, or even very hot. So also having kind of an organization, I don't know, or consortium of institutions trying to assess the quality of these technologies and to provide some unbiased information about which technologies actually one should apply in which setting, I think would also be quite helpful. I mean, it's just more niche now, only on the technology trajectory. But if a farmer uses one technology once and it doesn't work, then there's a lot of trust that basically goes down the bin with it. So trying to focus more on the quality, I think, is important. And as you also said, finance instruments, I mean, why not thinking about revolving fund, for example, that one could utilize? Maybe you dish up some money up front, but then you get back some money from the farmers once the technology basically, once there is a return of investment, and he can pay it off, and you can use that money again to support other farmers. So it's not only, let's say, grants that we can utilize, but I think we would need to be more creative also in terms of what kind of finance mechanisms we actually can apply on the ground.
right? Okay. So I'm adding that as an idea on financing aspects. Any other lesson, because we have still a couple of minutes, it's something we missed from our panel.
If I may add one aspect, we've been discussing about increasing demand from an energy perspective at the local level, at the village level, at the microgrid level, for instance. But increasing this demand maybe also can be covered by looking at more the policy side of cooperative structures to aggregate farming produce, to leverage economies of scale, you know, organize farmers around price setting, processing, value addition, etc. And I guess these are definitely, I mean, I'm talking from more an energy perspective, so I'm not fully aware of this domain of policies, but I think reforms regarding that might also help and therefore create the demand from the bottom up. That might even come before any discussion on how to mobilize energy better at the farm level.
I think what you say is very important, because energy companies, the big ones, I mean, we've been approached by NL, NG, and so on. They tend to go where the demand is, and usually then they anchor to big farms or big, tourism places in the rural areas, the safari lodges, and these things that, well, up to recently were kind of guaranteed to work, to have demand, generate demand. And of course, it's more difficult when you do it with the farmers because they are diverse, and to aggregate them and so on. So yes, absolutely. And but it's again a matter of having these, changing the paradigm. Energy companies should not be just there to supply. They should enter into, okay, for what purpose? So should I supply the energy? And then you put the supplier and the user. And I think this would be very, very useful. Okay. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, so just quickly on that subject, I was just reminded that I was just remembering that we had a webinar series focused on mini grids. And I remember during the Q&A session, it was organized with many developers from primarily Sub-Saharan Africa. And when we started talking about the tariff issue, many of the developers and policymakers were saying that the question or the discussion around tariffs should actually be changed into more of the service that the mini grids were going to be providing. So I think that is from that discussion, it seems that the population might be willing to pay a little bit more if at the end it gets a service, as we mentioned, when it comes to milling, enabling them to increase their productivity and at the end of the income. So it was a very kind of interesting turnout during that webinar, where at the end of the day, as we're talking about it now, the level of service, the quality of the service would be, if there could be a kind of like a confirmation that the quality of the service that is going to be provided is going to be superior. It seems that people would be willing to pay a little bit more to get a good service, which, because at the end of the day, it will be able to increase their productivity and at the end, their income. So it was a just very interesting webinar that we had, and I just remember that now that we're mentioning about the quality and the service provided.
Good. So it's not only from our side, there's also some other webinars where the same idea is coming up. Right. I'm looking at the panelists. Any other thoughts, last idea? We gave ourselves a lot of challenges, but okay, that's part of the game. And I'm curious to ask Sherab, you are based in Nairobi, and you thematic point for energy access at SDG 7 youth constituency. So do you gather,
yes.
Do you organize youth meetings on the topic of energy and agriculture in Kenya, or what? Because I truly think that youth is absolutely key. I mean,
yeah. So how the SDG 7 youth constituency is structured, there are regional focal points, and then there are thematic focal points, as I am, for energy access. But we do have a specific focal point who deals with water, energy, and the food nexus, which is very similar to the topic that we are talking about today. And we organize webinars and discussions and white papers and all of that, yeah.
And the audience of these papers is what, policymakers or university? Well,
most of the time it's centered towards the other youth, it's more for giving them knowledge on how policies are structured, okay, and if they want more of that. And then sometimes maybe like Vienna Energy Forum would want our thoughts and opinions on something from a youth perspective, then we will draft a white paper to them.
No, I think we all agree that there's a lot of opportunities actually for the youth in the kind of topics that we talk. I mean, not only from the energy, technology and services, I mean, so local job creation, but also if you improve the farming case, I mean, people in the farms, I mean, they could continue their parents' business. I mean, it could help their parents in making a better business. I mean, with all these new technologies, innovation, digitalization, that kind of thing. Which I used to say, this is all nice, but we need energy for all the innovations and digitalization. If you don't have energy to recharge your phone or your computer, then you're a bit lost. I mean, okay, good. So this is something that I think we should mention, is the whole aspect. We actually we need to mention also the gender aspect. In FAO, we carried out cost and benefit analysis, environment, social, financial of introducing renewable energy in different food chains, but also the gender aspect. And this is who does what in deploying the energy. And it depends on the type of energy, you know, maybe easier with solar than with biogas, for example. So who does what and who gets the extra income from having access to energy. These are all important aspects that we need to take into account.
Yeah, and it was also fresh to see that we had the section on youth and gender in the discussion paper that was anchored on.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are still waiting for Joseph, but I think we shouldn't be kept too much in the waiting position. I'm honestly grateful for your time and for your expertise that you will lend to this discussion. We are here in the Enablers group, and you have come together as absolute experts on what enablers are needed to create the energy transition for food systems. You know each other probably, but for the audience who doesn't yet know any of you, just briefly, Mansour Ahmad is joining us from FCDO. He is an expert in African agribusiness investment and regional food trade. We are also joined by Lowell Randall. He's the vice president of the Global Cold Chain Alliance and is definitely committed to building controlled supply chain systems, particularly when it comes to temperature around the world. And they have worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with USAID and USDA and IFC and many others. We are also grateful to have Camille with us. She is the CEO of Anka in Madagascar, and she's really at the grassroots of the overall energy journey that we are undertaking, particularly committed to the role of renewable energy in agricultural development. Women and youth are key to what you are doing, Camille. And then obviously we also have Fiona from Shell Foundation. We are very happy to have you on board. You're also an expert on exactly the topic at hand, energy transitions and food systems. So without much further ado, I would like to encourage you. We're still waiting for Joseph, but it will be fine at any point that he's joining us. The first question that I have for you, and I would ask you to answer it condensed and briefly, would be how how do you see can the energy transition enablers for the food system transformation be described? So maybe give me your top, let's say, 3 points of what the enablers are to make this happen. And I would like to start with Lowell, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with everybody. And the Global Cold Chain Alliance is an association, as you stated, that is committed to promoting the cold chain globally. And so these efforts, really energy sustainability is so critical, and people don't always think about the cold chain as connected to the farm. But as we saw in the plenary session, without access to reliable cold storage, there's tremendous loss, and that in itself creates energy inefficiency. I think just very briefly, the 3 things that I will bring forward are, one is financing capital. I think that's going to be key. I think another one is going to be training and education. For what we've seen is, while you may have good technology, and that's the third, so you've got financing, education, and technology. Without all 3 of those working together, you have the potential for falling down. So for example, when you see great technology put into place, but people aren't trained on how to use it effectively, that investment can be lost. And again, then that has a detrimental effect on energy. So I'll stop there and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for very much. Kindly mute yourself again so that there is no echo. Wonderful. I know that your alliance is active in more, like in countries 40% outside of the US, like 40% of your activities are there. You're working with 1,300 companies. I think it's more than 85 countries. Very but let's go to the next speaker. I would like to welcome Joseph. Thank you very much for joining us from the FAO side. You weren't there at the introductions, but I would really like to draw on your expertise, particularly when it comes to sustainable agricultural mechanization and what kind of role that plays, what kind of crucial role to redeem Africa from the perpetual food insecurity. Please shed a light on what are your 3 top enablers for the transition that we need.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm sorry, I think I missed the beginning. I'm sorry for that. Yes, I'm from the Sustainable Mechanization team in the FAO Rome. And when you look at Africa, first of all, we have to acknowledge the reality that we have about between 60 and 80% human labor, which is human power or energy that comes from human beings for carrying out the basic tasks for plowing, land preparation, weeding, harvesting, transportation of the harvest, and also sometimes collecting drinking water and collecting firewood, which is largely done by hand. And that's one of the reasons why we have this situation that the youth, let's say the younger generation, is actually not willing any longer to stay in the rural areas, and they start migrating to the cities and to the urban centers where they hope for better opportunities. And this is where we have the starting point. We need access to modern technology, and modern in the sense of small technology as well. I mean, I think the private sector machinery companies have sometimes forgotten the African smallholders who needs simply a little bit leaner and smaller equipment that is affordable, but that's doing the job. So we need to go down to smaller horsepower tractors, even two-wheel tractors that have been the link in, for example, in Asian countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, where the two-wheel tractors have been the missing link between the let's say the animal traction power and then the mechanical power. And here we can make a difference when we help the private sector to understand that the market needs for smallholder farmers in the rural areas of Africa. We have very interesting new developments. We have startups where you can now call your tractor service on a mobile phone with SMS technology. So we basically need better rural infrastructure where mobile technologies can be utilized. Farmers and young people and the rural people, they do everything with their mobile phone like we do, basically. It's often based on SMS technology, not on the app, on the smartphone, but it's enough. And so if we can combine, let's say, modern mobile technology with simple mechanical technology and having incentive packages. And here we think we need to support the smallholders for being able to access such services. We need maybe vouchers, service vouchers, that each family and each rural household is able to call for the mechanization services they need. Then, of course, we can also do something on the actual practice. Not every field has to be plowed all the time. We have today reduced the no-till and direct seeding technology that requires far less farm power because it's more precise. We can place this modern technology, place the seeds more correctly and in the right size at the right time. So the technology is there, but I think it's capacitating and enabling the users to access it, to afford it. And this can even create new businesses for young entrepreneurs, like startup companies that provide this kind of services. So there's a lot of ideas and going on in this respect. And I think it's important to build on the youth. For too long, there was this argument that technology is displacing labor. The opposite is true. With modern technology, we're creating new jobs that are up to date and using modern technology.
Thank you so much. I think this is a brilliant segue for our next speaker. You have made very valid points of we need modern technology, we do need incentive packages, and probably even thinking about capacity building and particularly targeting the youth. So these are three that I take away from you. Of course, Lowell, I take away from you that the financing component is crucial, the capacity component is crucial, and also you were alluding to the technology. I mean, in the cold chain, that's definitely key. Now, yet, Joseph, you provided the great segue to the grassroots level. Camille, I would like to tap into your knowledge. So how much of what Joseph said can you agree to, judging from your perspective of the 3.0 mini-grids and all the work that Anka is undertaking with the merger that you have just recently actually managed so well? So let us know, what are your enablers to this energy food system?
I would agree with 100% of what Joseph said, to be honest. And also to what Lower said, I think that there is much to say about financing, technical support, access to a lot of tools and means to empower those rural communities. From my perspective, which is on the field and working a lot with the rural communities in the local villages, and especially with women associations and young entrepreneurs, we are oftenly struggling with the lack of local expertise, and it's sometimes very difficult for us as a mini-grid operator, developer and operator to fill the gap and to provide what is needed. So we often seek for expertise from different sectors, and we try to gather those experts to support our projects. But at the very core of the issue, and especially from an SME perspective, because my company is just an SME, we need financing. We are talking about almost research and development, and building this bridge between energy access and agricultural development seems to be new, whereas I feel like we around the table and probably in the audience, we feel like it's quite logical and rational to build the bridge. But there's not that many, financiers and financing programs who actually see this bridge, this link. And sometimes it's just confusing to them. So why are you working on the energy sector and now entering the agricultural sector? But we just feel like, as a mini-grid developer and operator on the field, thanks to our presence, we can be sort of a catalyst and an incubator of solutions. We can provide access to a market, we can provide access to a network, we can work out issues with microfinancing institutions or local banks. But at some point, there is something missing in the dialogue. So I think that it would be very interesting to bring more people to the table from the energy sector and the agricultural sector and make and recreate this dialogue if it has ever existed before. But to be honest, I don't really see it in my day-to-day business. And we are seeing more and more initiatives from local entrepreneurs and from very young people who really want to do something in their own community. They need electricity because if there is no power, they can't set up something and they will have to go to the city, to the town to get a job. But every time you bring electricity, thanks to mini-grid, for instance, which is our case, they try to come back to their native village to work with the family, to develop a new business, because there is a huge connection with native places and origins, and they really want to do something for their villages. And it's sometimes very sad to see how difficult it is for these entrepreneurs to get the support, not only from the financing parties and the technical assistance providers, but also from the authorities, who are not necessarily really supportive to them and to their projects. Authorities do not have any means. There is no real plan for developing those areas. Most of the time, we see those documentation for local or regional development plans, but they're not very specific. There's no mention of any specific means. The route, the path is unclear. And all of those entrepreneurs are kind of in this vague environment. We try to support them by providing them with training, with coaching. We try to structure financing around them, and with this agri-grid model that we been working on for the past 2 years, we are really structuring something innovative around mini-grid models and agri-components locally. But still, we have to prove to the world that it's worse and that it makes sense, always by providing numbers and feedback, which is completely normal, but this takes time. And I hope that in the meantime, we'll get more support and more visibility around what we're doing.
The work that you're doing is really inspirational. I mean, you have conducted 15 mini-grids, and I think it's in the meantime many more, supplying more than almost 60,000 people with electricity, which is really amazing work. Thanks for all of that. You were speaking about the lack of finance, and this is particularly, of course, the segue to the representatives that are here, not only Fiona from the Shell Foundation, but also Masroor Ahmad, because both of you are exactly at that juncture. You are in the midst of projects that are looking at scalability and are looking at financing exactly projects like these. So Mansour, I saw that you had difficulties connecting, and I'm sorry for all the technical disadvantages, but as long as we have you on, and Fiona, please bear with us. Mansour, the floor is yours. Please do give us your top 3 enablers that we need from your perspective from the
Sure.
former VEF CDO.
Thank you very much, Monica. And apologies if I duplicate what others have said, but definitely take inspiration from the work Camille and Anka are doing. But let me keep it 3 points. And I think what underpins all of these is really being cognizant of the context that we're talking about, both geographically, because what works in one country or even region may not be what may not work in a specific local area. But in terms of the 3 aspects, I think first of all, aligning interests. A lot of what we see on the energy-related initiative on productive use is very energy-led and not led by the sector. And by that, I mean, when we look at the energy nexus with agri, having now sat on the agri side of the fence, it's not really led by the agri folk. It's all led by renewable energy developers. That's not a bad thing, but the main point here is we need to really balance the risk and rewards between energy developers and smallholder farmers. Secondly, slice and dice. What I mean by this is we really need to understand, I think as Joseph outlined, the current on-farm activities and contextualize what's needed based on various agri-value chains, from various staples to vegetables, etc. Because if we start unpacking that, we'll realize there's hundreds of different crops that are produced, all which need to be thought about in a very distinct way. So I think we need to slice and dice the market and the agri-value chain to understand both the energy intensity already and how that can become more efficient or cleaner. And secondly, what boost can energy provide, in particular clean energy, to smallholder farmers along that value chain. And then thirdly, margins matter. In particular, if we look at smallholder farmers, they're operating on thin margins. Their margins are already precarious and volatile. And then you've got the climate-related impact, etc. So the more burden that is put on their pockets in terms of cost of energy or other inputs, the kind of harder it is for them to make an appropriate margin. So again, when thinking about business models, different financial incentives, we really need to be cognizant of these smallholder farmers take small risk for short losses, and they can't really take big risks. So that needs to be incorporated into our thinking. And I think what I'll conclude by saying is fundamentally the ag sector needs to work with the energy folk. And I think that's something which internally in FCDO we're looking to do more of, because we also can do more on engaging with our energy teams and ag teams to do a bit more thinking of how this makes sense to avoid the issue of being energy.
Unfortunately, the line has again been interrupted, but I think, Lowell, many of your points were mentioned here as well. So optimizing and reducing the margins, basically, and many of Camille's points is, again, were reiterated. The dialogue between energy and agriculture needs to seemingly be fostered, and there is a lack of exchange of expertise. So very interesting. Unfortunately, he cut off. Fiona. I'm keenly interested in particularly your experience. I mean, you were in Uganda for years as a practitioner, but now you changed to the Shell Foundation. And with the CASI project, if I pronounce it correctly, you are working with FCDO, particularly on supporting smallholder farmers. Tell us, what are the enablers that you see, particularly when it comes to finance, to make the energy and food system transition happen?
Yeah, thank you. So 2 things before I get into the 3 enablers. One is I want to echo what Mansour said about context and how much that matters. And so really kind of engaging with the end users and the communities that are going to be the enablers is absolutely critical. And I think that's just kind of what needs to underline all of that. And so in all of these kinds of discussions, that's really the voice that also needs to be brought in. The second thing that I want to emphasize is the full value chain approach, and how kind of providing access to one enabler or addressing one barrier often is not enough, and needing to kind of address multiple components along the value chain or in order to actually make the enablers effective. I guess Shell Foundation is currently engaged in some research with RAFL, UKAID, and Dalberg, and 3 enablers that came out of that research is actually focused in Kenya. And so it's, again, context, Kenya, not multiple countries, but 3 enablers that came out of that were access to finance, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here because my colleagues have already mentioned all of these, but access to finance. So depending on the stage, whether that's finance for inputs or finance for productive use assets, or depending on, again, the stage, it's different types of financing. A second one is markets. So that is market information, direct market linkages, logistics, storage, all of the components around access to markets. And then the third is knowledge or kind of education. So whether that's around climate smart agriculture practices, on kind of improving efficiencies, whether it's on technologies, different components of education. And then kind of as a underlining piece as well, it's kind of this women engagement piece as well, which is really important. And I know, Monica, you're going to be touching on this later, but I do want to emphasize that as a key component as well in terms of enablers. So yeah, those are kind of the three that I'd like to highlight.
Finance, markets, and knowledge and education. Something that has been now reoccurringly mentioned is women and youth, obviously, as key to the overall effort. Now, I would like you, before we go into a round later on formulating recommendations. Like we have now compiled sort of the enablers that we see, but I would like you to focus on, for the next round of, let's say, a couple of minutes, how can this be done, particularly with women and youth in mind? So maybe I can hand over the floor again to you, Joseph. I see that we lost Lowell, but Joseph, can you tell us what are your insights in particularly for those target groups? Oh, sorry, Joseph, I cannot hear you. I don't know whether you're still on mute. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, basically we need to organize the youth and specifically also female youth, the women. Many of them are very keen to contribute to development in their own area. And if you look at mechanization, and we see that there's this missing link between the smallholder farmer that cannot afford all his own equipment park. It's not possible and also not necessary. On the other hand, we have a lack of what we call mechanization hire service providers. This is kind of a type of business that we try to support and to build up locally in various programs. We have training material where you can have short courses where you learn both. What are the basic technical features of a small tractor or of a seeder or a weeder? And then that's one part. The other part is, what is the basic skills, the business skills? How to set up your business, how to do a basic market research. Where are my clients? What do they need? And then, of course, with that is a simple, and then we do this with a financial service provider that also have maybe a financial plan. I mean, for acquiring maybe with grants that the program can help pay maybe 50%, and the other 50% it has to be brought by the trained or by the young entrepreneur. And this kind of programs is what we are focusing on. Basically, it's the capacity building program. But I want to link this also to, I like what Shell said, I mean, Fiona, about climate smart agriculture. We do not want just to promote any type of mechanization. It has to be mechanization that is lean, and that's in line with the latest ideas of protecting the soil. I mean, soil health is key. I mean, that's the base for agriculture in rural Africa. And we have seen sometimes the wrong machinery is also causing erosion and causing degradation, and then we have lost it all. So it's kind of a combination of good economic practices, good business skills, and with an investment plan, a business plan together with a financial service provider to build up these young entrepreneurs. That's kind of what we're working on right now in various places of rural Africa, in the north of Uganda, in Zambia, in Kenya, to mention a few.
Lowell, I do want to give the floor to you immediately. How do you see the role of youth and women, particularly?
Yeah. Yes, and I'm sorry. I guess I had a technical issue and was kicked out of the system, and then it took a while for it to allow me to get back in. So I'm not sure what all has been that I missed. But the role of youth and women is absolutely critical. I think when you look at agriculture in these developing nations. Finding high value commodities that need cold storage, those provide some of the best opportunities for youth and women from an economic perspective, and they can play such a critical role in building those, building that economy. And so I think we really have to pay very close attention to those opportunities and provide them, as I mentioned before, with training and education, both on farm, but also the value of cold chain. It's not something that everybody will automatically understand. And there are some very low cost things aside from technology like what we see with SEforALL, which I think is tremendous. We have other great examples in Nigeria like cold hubs, where there are solar modular cold rooms that can be built, and those models can be great. But it's educating the youth and educating the women that are involved in these operations that cold chain is critical, and that even on farm, just simply shade can extend life of product before it gets into the more formalized cold chain. And so I can't stress enough the education and the training component and the need for that. And then again, the value of financing, microfinancing to support women and youth getting involved and being able to enter the market in an appropriate and a sustainable way. So again, but all of these things need to work together. One in a vacuum is not going to be a sufficient solution. You've got to have the financing, you've got to have the training, and with that, the third leg of the stool again is technology, and technology like SEforALL, like cold hubs, like from a farm production standpoint, we've heard some of the other speakers discuss. I think it's really that three-legged stool where you have to have all those three working together. And in particular for women and youth, you have to be very intentional in outreach to those communities to make sure they have the access and the awareness.
So let me continue to ask you, because I know that your association is composited of three associations and one foundation. And the one foundation we're talking about is the World Food Logistics Organization. And they're really very much into education and R&D work. So would I be a government representative? How can I tap into that knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do work with a lot of governmental organizations. The World Food Logistics Organization has conducted cold chain capacity development really on every continent except for Antarctica. They have their own cold chain kind of well established. But we would welcome that opportunity, and so part of that is we try to seek out those opportunities with donor community, but we don't always know. We don't while we may be operating in lots of different parts of the world, we need them to also come to us. So as we think about that relationship, we're very familiar with groups like USAID, for example, and so we are routinely working with them on funding opportunities. But as we look at other donors, other financiers within governments, I think finding ways to increase the dialogue. forums like this are really key, because not everybody knows who the Global Cold Chain Alliance is, who the World Food Logistics Organization is. And we do have a lot of capacity, both scientific experts, but also industry experts. And I think that's an important point, that we have the practical experts from our industry that we can apply and engage with government donor community and the people on the ground to share that technical assistance and the lessons learned. So we would certainly welcome increased engagement with governments, whether that's in a donor capacity or just technical assistance and sharing our expertise, something we would absolutely welcome. So I appreciate the question, because it's certainly an area where we want to grow our global activities as much as we can, because we believe that capacity development in the cold chain is absolutely critical. And again, we've all got to work together.
Much, Lowell. We unfortunately lost Mansour again. I would have loved to ask him the next question, but Camille, I want to hear your opinion as well. You have heard now from Lowell, a three-legged stool, training, technology, finance. We have heard from others. You have put an emphasis on empowering women, and you are working with the Women Association. You're working on capacity building. So you have already given us the argument that this segment of society is absolutely crucial. But how can we involve them better? What needs to be done from your grassroots perspective?
Well, I think that first, regarding the capacity building aspect and technical assistance, I think that it's important to also mention that a short-term or very sporadic trainings are not sufficient, and that we need to look at this support to women as a long-term path. I think that we can all acknowledge that once we get trained on a new techniques or on a new equipment, this is nice and we can start. But maybe on the midterm, on the long term, we will need to upgrade skills and capacities, and most of the time there is nobody anymore there to support you, because you've already received a training in the first place. So sometimes it's also difficult to, it's always a matter of financing. I mean, we have great ideas, we know a lot of things, we've been on the field, we've observed, we've learned, but we need at some point financing support. And I'm a bit sad to see that, or I didn't speak to the right people. That's also a possibility. But I'm sad to see that once you received one financing support to provide your support and your training to those women associations, or not only women, actually all the people we're working with, it's just it stops there, and there's nothing for the future. So it becomes very difficult to support those groups of women on the long term, and make sure that the results will be there, and that they will increase capacity and deliver more and more thanks to through their activities. So I would just like to emphasize the timeline and the idea of short-term capacity building, but also long-term training in addition. And one other thing is that I'd like to mention is about grouping and federating those women, because if you only work, or if you only support one individual, it becomes very difficult, both for you and actually for this person. And what we see is that in rural areas, cooperatives, associations, groups of farmers or groups of women are much more powerful, and their structuring makes it more efficient to develop an activity, or to receive funds, or to get support, and so on. So we try to encourage individuals to actually group and become associations. So we work with women associations more than with female entrepreneurs. I find it much more effective but I think it's also much more effective for them because they also, find complementarities in their skills. They can rely on each other to do the job because obviously in rural areas, when you're working in a farm, you're also actually at the same time working at home and doing something for the rest of your family or for friends or for your husband. So we have to make sure that those women actually have the space and the means that are needed to for them to do what's to perform in their sector. And the last thing that I would like to mention, that's maybe more on our perspective as an SME trying to support those women's association. When we seek for support, technical expertise, technical assistance, or funding, sometimes it's very difficult. That's something that I mentioned earlier, but it's sometimes difficult to point out the proper investor or the proper financing programs. I've been doing some fundraising for some of our projects, and while we were working on this agri-grid concept, we listed more than 100 investors, working in this environment. 50 of them were more related to the off-grid energy sector, and 50 of them were more related to agriculture. But almost none of them were actually, working on both or considering both at the same time. And that was also a very long work because we were, forced to spend a lot of hours and days and weeks trying to identify all of those stakeholders. And I think that a one-stop shop or sort of a platform easily accessible, even locally at the country level, would be very useful. And I'm not aware of those kind of platforms, but I think that even those women associations, without our help, could access at the country level some platforms to get more information about the options, the possibilities, the support that exists, the means that exist, and so on.
Thank you so much, Camille. I know that you should touch base with Joseph on this one, because Joseph has done lots of research on the knowledge exchange platforms that are existing, and I'm sure that he can be utterly helpful in this regard.
Fiona, you can save me time. Thanks.
Yeah, so Joseph and Camille, you need to afterwards connect again. Fiona, you spoke about context matters. You spoke about full value chain approach. I like that. And of course, knowledge and education, particularly women engagement. Can you give us your perspective on how can this be done? Youth, women, how? How does Shell Foundation do it?
Yeah, so just focusing on women, kind of 3 points on this. So in addition to what Camille said about engaging women's groups, 3 points. One is addressing social barriers, not just providing women-tailored products. So an example of this is women tend to spend money on their family rather than necessarily investing in their business. And so making sure that that social barriers are being addressed in order to help women maintain the savings that they have or invest them into the business instead. A second one that I want to emphasize is time poverty. So women and men both struggle with time poverty. Women often have a larger burden on their time due to family and household responsibilities. So providing solutions that address that, whether that's subsidized childcare or other ways of addressing this time poverty issue, is important. And that goes hand in hand with kind of addressing some of the social norms that are holding women back. A third one is I want to reemphasize training. So we found in this research that I was mentioning with Raffle that and UK Aid that men that engage with their wives or women in decision making tend to have higher opinions of women. And so if training around business or financial use or even agriculture is incorporated, it will also improve their standard or kind of the respect towards them. I also want to answer this a little bit in terms of kind of the entrepreneur side, and this is something we're trying to address over at Shell Foundation, is how to get more female entrepreneurs funding. And actually, one of my colleagues, we don't have the answer. One of my colleagues is actually working on a really interesting way of structuring funding for female entrepreneurs, because often female entrepreneurs not only aren't able to access the financing, but they're not able to kind of, even once they're able to get to a certain level of the business, continue accessing the financing. And so this is a really interesting piece that we're exploring as well.
Very much to the point. Mansoor, the floor is yours. Can you give us a glimpse of how in your slice and dice, or aligning interests, slice and dice and margins matter approach, how can women and youth be more engaged?
So first of all, this is really important,
it's
but
still
also
muted, Mansoor?
I've unmuted. Can you? Okay. So I think it's really important, but also very hard. And so within, for example, our portfolio includes AgDevco, which is an impact investment vehicle. And so from that, what we've gleaned is there are various crops or parts of the agri-value chain which are more aligned to empowering women than some others. So I think someone mentioned earlier about the intentionality of engaging women within what we do. I think it's really important within that slicing and dicing that we have a lens that we look through regarding the role of women across the agri-value chain, whether that's as an employee, as an entrepreneur or employer, or as a customer. I think that will help us really strengthen our financing or initiatives related to agri. And I think the last point I'd make is looking at women's agency. What we've also kind of begun to understand is that a lot of women, especially in agri-businesses, often are constrained in the roles that they have and are not necessarily moving up through the ranks. So I think one thing which I'm increasingly looking at is how we can strengthen women agency within kind of the agri-value chain and to enable that empowerment to happen. And I think the similar perspective applies to youth as well.
We have 3 more minutes before we go back to the main plenary. I want to use these 3 more minutes for each of you to tell me one sentence of a recommendation that you want me to put forward in the plenary. And I start with Lowell. You had little time to think about it. Sorry.
Be right on the spot. I think I just will go back to the three-legged stool then and just say that my recommendation is that policies must incorporate the 3 key components of financing, technology, and training.
To the point. Wonderful.
Joseph, what is your one recommendation? We can't hear you. You're still muted. Sorry.
My corner of sustainable mechanization in you recognize that women farmers are carry the burden of the energy, human energy for smallholder farming in Africa, and we need incentives and we need programs to reduce that burden. Basically, increase the mechanical means for farming for the sake of rural women to be released. This is a forgotten issue that too many smallholder farms are relying entirely on human labor, and that is almost unbearable in the year 2021.
Mansoor, your one recommendation point.
I think fundamentally, agri-businesses, including smallholder farmers, need to work with energy businesses. And so this needs to be a co-creation to enable that balance of risk, reward, and impact.
Brilliant, thank you. Camille.
Yeah, I won't be surprising you with any. You can hear me now. Yeah, I won't be giving any brilliant idea. I think that everything has just been said. That's what is good with talking at the first seat. So no, but if I have only one thing, I'd say, yeah, financing, but a bridging financing between energy and agriculture.
Perfect. Okay, Fiona, last but not least.
And nothing new here, but the need for innovation around financing. And also addressing challenges around full value chain rather than one-off approaches in isolation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been an intensive round, at least for me. lots of scripts. I hope that I can at least take some of your wonderful advice to the main plenary. Thank you so much for your contributions. Do continue the dialogue amongst each other, and I hope to be in touch with many of you. Thank you so much. We leave to the plenary again. See you there.
My name is Filippo Berardi. I work at the Global Environment Facility. I have the pleasure to moderate the session today. For our participants, I'll just give a quick introduction to our speakers, and then I'll just move into the questions. This session is about data and evidence. So we're going to have two questions, and I would like to invite all of our speakers to address the first one, perhaps with maximum 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes, and then we'll follow up with the second question. If anybody in the audience want to propose, like introduce an additional angle or ask a question, please do so in the chat, and I will invite our speakers to take the question as they can during their time. So in the panel today, we have Sarah Mbago-Bonu, who is the director at IFAD's East and Southern Africa division. Thank you very much, Sarah, for joining us today. Ujunwa Ojumeni, who's an impact investing, energy and development expert with the Office of the Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources of Lagos State, and also an advisor with PFAN, which is the Private Sector Advisory Network. Thank you for being with us this morning or this afternoon. Juliette Besnard is energy specialist at the World Bank with ESMAP. Karem Erici, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, is an innovator, entrepreneur, and he funded 2 startups that have a very interesting business model and very relevant for the discussion today. So I look forward to hear from him. And Thomas Momans, who is a sustainable energy financial specialist at the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, or BASE. So the 2 questions we are going to go through today. The first one is related to the opportunities and the barriers that we see to stimulate sustainable energy at farm level. So I'd like to hear a little bit, I'd like to sort of pose the first question in a bit of an open fashion to get your views on how we can stimulate the increase of sustainable energy at farm level. What are the key barriers that you see from your observation standpoint, and what can we do about it? And then as we move into the second question, I would like to hear a bit more about the data side. So what data is needed to sort of assess the potential of sustainable energy in a particular geographical country context? And how can we collect this data? Is it available? What can we do to make it available? And to what extent we can use this data, for example, to unlock financing, to support financial institutions in their decision-making process on whether to invest or not in sustainable energy technologies at farm level. So these are the 2 questions. You have them. You can think about it as we go through it. But first of all, I'd like to invite Sarah, if you could kick us off with the first question on the opportunities to increase sustainable energy at farm level. What are the barriers? What can we do about it? Sarah, please.
Wanted to unmute. No, thank you very much, Filippo. Hello, good afternoon to colleagues. It's exciting to join this panel. And I think this is one of the biggest development challenges that we face, a hurdle that we need to bridge if we're going to make a difference in, in this decade of action for the SDGs. As IFAD, a UN agency mandated also to provide sustainable development finance, we find it very, very difficult to focus on rural transformation without integrating that energy piece. So I thank you for the opportunity of being here. The main challenges that we see right now in sub-Saharan Africa is that basically energy use consumption per capita is amongst the lowest in the world. We see that, but I don't think it's because Africans, whether they're urban or rural, don't have energy needs. Most of the energy is now being filled by biomass, which is clearly unsustainable. And some of the barriers you asked us to think about. Well, first of all, if we look just at the traditional electricity grid, we don't have a reliable generation infrastructure. So that doesn't necessarily exist. Transmission and distribution networks, these are outdated or in most cases underdeveloped. There's high leakages, losses, frequent blackouts, and load shedding. And then the alternative is usually diesel generators, which are very expensive and also have their own negative climate impacts. So what does this mean in terms of how we can do it? And I think later on, as we come back to the data piece, just understanding on average, the outages per month, the average duration, which is 5.7 hours, and looking at roughly 3 months in a year, how are we going to be able to bridge those needs? I think that is very important. And now, when we look at the opportunities, of course, smallholder farmers, the only reason that they have incentives to invest on their farms is if they can make a profit and if they have access to markets. So as long as we cannot sufficiently incentivize them, we can basically not think about adoption of energy solutions. We started off with a very nice video from the young man who set the scene for us, who was really providing a range of technologies around increasing shelf life, reducing post-harvest losses, and so on. But I think energy starts with production. And just having simple energy solutions that would increase access to water, its essential ingredient, is absolutely critical. Having also energy for diagnostic tools to understand what is the pH, the balances, and so on. Those types of solutions are also needed. We also need solutions that will enable us to better forecast because of climate change. When should I plant? Which type of technology should I use in terms of seed with the soil mix that I have for pH? So we need a couple of, energy to run decision-making tools at the farm level. And then we also need some energy for mechanization. And so for me, we do have ranges of farm sizes. They're not all the same across Africa. So we find in peri-urban areas an emerging farmer, which who has 1 to 5 hectares. There, the adoption and the use of energy and the energy mix is completely different from the classic lower than an acre smallholder farmer that we really want to transform. And unless we are able to provide a solution that is affordable, we won't be able to do it. And I think the brainstorming around this table is what is key. Some experiences, for instance, in Mozambique, just on the outskirts of Maputo, an IFAD finance program called Promer has been able to promote solar multi-service water points, which we really see has been quite impactful in unlocking both the livestock access to water, building up agri-services, agro-veterinary services to provide to the livestock, also providing water for irrigation for horticulture. So really meeting multiple needs at community level, which then basically means that that technology has gone to scale because community contributions can have a community effect. But looking beyond community and looking at, let's say, irrigating on farm, drip irrigation solutions are there. They look at water efficiency, but they really need to be powered by solar, for instance, that enables us to bridge some of the uptake costs. Many smallholder farmers don't know the technology exists, solar particularly, and a lot needs to be invested in communication and actually roll out dissemination agency and just developing a fabric and infrastructure in which they can get access to these renewable energy. So let me stop there. Over to you, Filippo, but keen to exchange further on this topic.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Very, very interesting point. The point around aggregation and use of energy for the community at large, I think, is the key one. We know how active users can really be the anchor for the entire community here. I would like to then move on to Benoit, if you could offer us your perspective on the same question. That would be great.
All right, thank you very much. The introductions and the further comments by Sarah have provided some great context, and I'll just provide a little bit of local context, especially in Nigeria, where I'm from. Today, we know that about 75% of the Nigerian smallholder farmers live below the poverty line in Nigeria. And these same small-scale farmers produce most of the food that's consumed in the country. So we know it's very important to ensure that they have the solutions they need to be sustainable, and access to reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy remains one of the key challenges they face due to issues like post-harvest losses when they don't have cold storage due to infrastructure, poor grids, just as Sarah explained, and transport systems missing to transport these food products to where they are needed. But also in terms of access to energy, the fact that the alternatives that they have are mostly expensive and not sustainable. So it results in other concerns like health challenges or even climate change, which is a bit more further from their perspective. But we know that these communities, for them to progress and go above the poverty line, their products need to move from being low value to higher value products. And I believe that that's the role that energy, access to energy plays, whether it's in terms of processing sustainably, whether it's transporting it sustainably to other parts, or even storing. These are important areas where we need sustainable energy in order to ensure that the products become high value. But we know that there are challenges with having some of these renewable energy solutions or sustainable solutions, from investments to the costs, at least upfront costs, and even mobile ICT services to help with market information and to get data to understand, one, how to even use some of the products, even when they don't have the support they need. So it's very important for us then to support not just the smallholder farmers who are providing and sustaining most of the developing countries, but then also the entrepreneurs and enterprises within the sector who are almost the MVPs because they're providing the solutions that actually lead to sustainability. One area I believe would be key to continue to support these enterprises is project preparation. Most times, a lot of the projects in low-income areas and even in developing countries are not prepared to receive the kind of funding they need. They haven't put together the required documentation, whether it's around customers, whether it's around any agreements they need to sign, whether with the communities or with the users. And project preparation programs, for instance, the PFAN, so that's Private Finance and Advisory Network, is an opportunity that exists to help to move both the energy enterprises who are providing solutions to the farm communities to have sustainable projects that can then be financed. The second area I would say is standardization. And when we talk about data later, I will speak a bit about that. But we need to have standardized data and investment documentation, because you can't be looking for funding for some of these projects if you don't have standardized documents that any investor can pick up and understand. And so support in this area, and this is an opportunity for support from whether it's donors or organizations to support. The third area I believe would be key to help to accelerate and scale up this sector would be in terms of the transaction size. So from what we've described, we already see that these farmers and these communities are mostly small and discrete in various areas. And most times when you're looking to invest or fund a big energy project, as most investors like to look at it, it's difficult to pick a tiny project in one community, another tiny project in another community due to the transaction costs that results. So it's important to find ways and through avenues. This could be through associations within the industry, could be the renewable energy associations or the broader ones across Africa, where we can then bundle projects together potentially to say this is a group of projects serving this purpose, serving this market, serving these farming communities that can be put together, and hopefully there's data on what is required for those projects, which we'll talk about a bit more later. And the last item I'll talk about is really strengthening local capacity, because it's one thing to know that these solutions are required for the local communities. But if you don't have the capacity, whether within the energy companies providing these solutions or within the farmers or the smallholder farmers, it will be difficult to be able to scale or for these solutions to be useful to them. So it's important to strengthen their capacity to help to really just help them, whether it's in terms of incentives in some cases, maybe if there are incentives like tax holidays for those kinds of businesses to help them to scale faster, but also in terms of the necessary training and support they need as entrepreneurs. I believe it will help us scale. So we've seen that it's important, access to reliable and sustainable energy is important to move the farming communities above the poverty line. But we also know that enterprises in these sectors need all the support they can get in terms of project preparation, capacity building, as well as potentially bundled projects to be able to access the funding they need to scale.
Thank you very much. All very, very, very good points. Need to look at the upfront cost, the capital investments, standardization, the transaction side and the aggregation of demand, and then finally the local capacity. I couldn't agree more. Let me now move it to Juliette. Juliette is an energy specialist at ESMAP, where she focuses on energy access. So I think we can have a very interesting additional angle from her. Juliette, take it away.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Filippo. So I'll try to be brief. Basically, as we design electrification programs, there is always a lot of focus on supply, expecting that demand and especially productive demand will follow. But what we see in some countries is that despite very aggressive electrification campaigns, demand, especially from productive users and farmers, that does not take off. Demand side opportunities are basically completely overlooked by energy practitioners. So it's changing slowly, but basically to realize that potential, especially in agriculture, we think that there is a real need to build an ecosystem structured in around, let's say, 4 blocks. The first one is really about demand assessment, and this is very much data related. The second one is on demand stimulation, so building awareness, business development services, etc. The third one is about the availability and affordability of highly energy efficient appliances. And the fourth one is about the reliability and the quality of electricity supply. So from the technology point of view, we've seen that technologies have significantly evolved over the recent years with new business model, very innovative business model on pay-as-you-go, modular and mobile units, integrated approaches, which basically provide access to market, access to finance, etc. However, again, technologies and connections are not enough, and there are multiple challenges for these technologies to really uptake. So the first one is that this potential will only realize if there is adoption from end users. I mean, it has been mentioned already, but many farmers do not understand or are not fully aware of the long-term benefits of those appliances and what can be the impact on their productivity. The second is really about limited access to finance with high upfront cost of those equipment. And basically the different barriers to overcome and to build this ecosystem are about are about policies and incentives, especially on tariff, for instance. Access to finance has been already mentioned. Market development to make sure that there are opportunities once productivity has increased. And also from the supply side, productive loads have some technical consideration, and it's not that straightforward to integrate that into a grid. There is always a lot of focus on off-grid technologies, but we really believe that mini-grid and also utilities on the on-grid side will play a key role to really realize that potential. And basically all these barriers require stakeholders interaction, collaboration, stakeholders from different backgrounds and different sectors. And we all know that many of them and of us are working in silos. So that's also a key barrier. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Okay, Juliette, thank you so much. I particularly like your list of constraint on the demand side, and I agree with you that we do put a lot of emphasis in the development and the IFI's community on the supply of sustainable energy, and perhaps demand is something that lags behind. So I appreciate the focus on that in this discussion. Let me then invite Kerem, please, to sort of offer your perspective from somebody that has got their hand dirty in the actual field with some very innovative business model through your two startups. So please, Kerem, the floor is yours. I am not sure we can hear you at the moment.
Okay, sorry. Now?
Yes, now it's good.
Okay, thank you, Filippo. I am the co-founder of two startups. One is climate adaptation startup that tracks severe weather and alerts people accordingly. And the second one is Tarla.io, which is a data generation tool, especially for farmers and corporates. We are working with corporates, and we want this data to be free to farmers for their usage. The use of this data, they can do better decisions and behave accordingly. So what we saw in the field is that everybody is looking for a solution to earn more and spend less. But today, the input expenses are going like crazy. I think it is in every part of the world. But the income is not following it. So there has to be some clever ways and some simple math to earn more by use of some intelligent solutions like data, satellites, tracking systems, technology, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, farmer decides very simple terms. If the action is profitable or not, they don't check if it is sustainable or not, if it is good for the future or not, if it is, I don't know, but the bottom line is the financial terms. So their action and inaction should be rewarded by governments, by cooperatives, by buyers, by corporates. So if we can design business models according to this very simple term, a simple math, if the action or inaction of farmers will give them a revenue increase, then it is okay. And we have to inline these investments with the sustainable goals of United Nations, let's say. for instance, let me give you an example. You have a diesel generator to energize your farm, and there's the solar panels. If solar panels cost you $10, whereas diesel is like just $1, who is going to buy solar panel, right? It is $1 versus $10. If this farmer is rewarded because of choosing sustainable environmental stuff by choosing $10 of solar panel, then somebody should reward those guys like $9, right? So this $9 should come from, I don't know where, but there is some resources in the, I don't know, in United Nations, in governments, in cooperatives, in buyers, and there is demand for that. For instance, in Northern Europe, people would like to consume more healthy, more nutritious, more natural stuff, and more sustainable ingredients for their food. So there will be a demand, there will be a surplus to invest this $9 at the end of the day. And people, or I don't know, policymakers or corporates should design those kind of incentives to those farmers. As I told you before, nobody in the field is checking if it is sustainable or not, unless it is incentivized or rewarded. So our data startup is try to feed the knowledge or information to corporates to design their business models while they are buying the food, acquiring land, or deciding long-term investments. I think I have to stop there, and maybe next question will be more relevant to our data acquisitions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kerem. We look forward to the input from you on the second question, but we do appreciate the focus that you bring on the issue of a basic financial analysis and the fact that capital costs of sustainable energy are often upfronted and more expensive than the existing energy generation options. So what do we do about that as a government policymaker and as international financial institutions and the donors community at large? Okay, and so last but not least, I'd like to invite Tomas, who's a sustainable energy specialist at BASE, to offer his perspective around the issue of question one. Tomas, please.
Thank you very much, Filippo, and thank you to everyone. It's actually very exciting to be the last one commenting because it was super interesting to hear to your comments, and actually I want to compliment and jump on what you said because each one of you really raised super relevant topics, from the meeting multiple needs with maybe one technology or repurposing technology to address different needs, energy needs or cooling needs, or standardizing the data and documentation, which actually goes hand in hand with digitalization, which is why I'm really excited about the question on data as well, or the transaction topic with bundling, and also the focus on the demand side. And maybe that's where I would like to add something, combining Juliet's and maybe Kerem's comment, taking also a story and anecdote, going back to that farmer that Kerem mentioned, who was maybe powering his farm with a diesel generator. No, suddenly someone comes with a solar panel and wants to essentially offer this service, and comes with maybe a financial analysis proving that this actually makes sense over the long term, that it makes sense to invest now because then after 3 years it will be reimbursed, and it makes much more sense than continuing to spend on diesel. And then what is clear is that we cannot influence with any business model unless we use subsidy, which is not really sustainable, the actual return of this technology. But the good thing is that these technologies are right now already profitable, so it's possible to generate returns from these technologies. But what we can influence is the risk-return correlation between these technologies. So any investment decision is based on this risk-return. How much risk do I take if I invest some money? And this is also the case for the farmer. He might be taking care of cattle, and then it's also how many cows could I buy to, instead of purchasing this solar panel, how much milk could I produce with this? And then what's the risk that I get? I know very well the return on investment of my cow, because I've been working with these for many years, but I have no clue of the risk of the solar panel, and will it actually generate the savings? And this is also one of the key barriers that we see as we develop business models and financial mechanisms. It's, of course, the additional upfront investment and access to finance, but also this lack of understanding of, or lack of trust in the performance of any of these systems, which might be energy generation, which might be cooling, which means that the decision is not only not based on long-term due to with the financial numbers, but also just because it's compared to other investments. So what can be done, what should be done with business models and financial mechanisms is addressing this risk perception and the actual risk by decreasing the risk and the risk perception, so that the return versus risk becomes attractive compared to other investments, which means that the investment can be prioritized and decision can be based on that. So this is one topic. Of course, other key barriers are the fact that any investor or business operator or farmer wants to invest in their core business. So in this case, it might be cows or cattle or produce, and not in cooling or energy, which is just required to deliver the output in the end. And finally, also, these new technologies require relatively, maybe not always complex, but it's perceived as complex maintenance and operation. And this knowledge also is not necessarily available. So there's two options, which is really building capacity for these farmers to actually operate this, or create business models in which the servicing and operation is really entirely part of the service delivered, and in which the technology provider has 100% the incentive to make sure the system works all the time, instead of just staying with a transaction model in which the asset is transferred, or the ownership is transferred, and then the farmer has to basically manage the asset. So these are just a couple of points. I don't know if I have more time, but maybe I'll stop here for now, and we can go in the second question to some other topics. I think you're mute, Filippo.
I don't think we'll ever learn about unmuting, but I was just saying that thank you very much for your intervention. And I think the point you raised at the end about provision of energy as a service, as a business model versus here's your solar panel, go operate it, and if it breaks tomorrow is your problem, then it's going to be really key. So lots of very interesting perspectives. I'll try to summarize all of these in the 2 minutes that I'm given at the end in the plenary. It's going to be challenging, but let's move on. So we are 28 minutes in. We have 45, so we have about 15 minutes left. I would ask you perhaps to be between 2 and 3 minutes max. We should be able to make it. For the second question, which is really the juice of this panel on data. So what data we need, what can data do for us, and how we make it available. So Sarah, why don't you take a first stab at that?
Thank you, Filippo. And I just want to build on what Thomas and Judith and the other speakers said. I mean, for us, it's really about unlocking both public and non-sovereign commercial finance. So we talked a little bit about blend. Blend was mentioned, but in order to develop markets for energy solutions, we really need to understand risk profiles. And I think it's really all about understanding risk and the data related to it. Now, there's different types of risks that developing markets are exposed to. So you have the political risks, the force majeures which are there, risks of changing regulations. How do you get that data? It's more macro. Then you have other types of risks around finance, the financial risks of the actual investment, and that's return, NPV, the market, the pricing, etc. So those demand sort of related types of risks. There's also operational risks, and also including sustainability, environmental as well as social. So understanding all those risks are absolutely important. particularly when you look at blend, because blend can be delivered at various levels. So there is blend really for macro level types of de-risking, insurance and guarantees. There's also blend finance for really assisting an operation to bridge the viability gap, as we call it, under financing. And then there's also a blend looking for sustainability and trying to come up with solutions which are affordable. Just this, and I'm talking right across the board when you're developing markets for new solutions and working with public and private sector actors and trying to match and getting a finance solution that works. So really rethinking the standards of traditional project finance will be required, and understanding the data that drives that. And then really looking at, as I mentioned before, institutional level matrix. But I want to just end by saying the data that we miss the most now is the GPS reference data around where the farms are, what the farm size is, what the soil metrics is, looking at forecasting the degradation in terms of productive capacities, looking at the mixes around the potential or risk for flooding, risk for pests, risk for those types of things, and then matching that to the cost of capital and blending something together that is going to encourage and de-risk and invite private sector to come in. I think those aspects of data are all very important. The pay-as-you-go scheme, this is a final piece. Now we see even mobile phone companies coming into it, using just basically mobile data, farmers' mobile data, to give loans. And there's no, let's say, two-way warehousing. There's no database that can actually give a risk profile of smallholder farmers and give assurance to those who are going to engage in pay-as-you-earn schemes that these farmers' credit record is viable. So the aggregators must come in, the SMEs must come in, and we look at Karim's types of models, innovators such as Karim, to say what type of operations can be put together in different contexts. It's definitely not one glove fits all. So let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Since you call him, I would like to hear from Kerem directly on what his company can do in terms of data availability, and what are you working on?
Okay, thank you, Filippo. I think I learned to unmute the system. Okay, so our company collects data from different sources. I mean, those sources are tremendous. For example, satellite, weather stations, sensors, weather radars, field sensors, crowdsourced data, or internet bots getting data or texts from the discussion panels are all source of the data, but data is not enough alone. So this data should become information, and this information is available when field experts or algorithms come into the picture. These field experts can be farmers or scientists or traders. So all of the crowdsourced intelligence turns data into information, and then comes the wisdom. And once you have this information, if you use it again and again, and if you build an experience on top of it, then you become a wise guy. You can understand bits and pieces, the environment, the data, the interactions, all sort of things becomes the wisdom, right? So I think this AI, machine learning, big data, cloud infrastructures is going to drive the world into that wisdom at the end of the day, because there are lots of startups like us who collects data from ground, from climate, and turns it into information like drought conditions, irrigation decision support, or fertilization decision support. Or we can consult traders where to buy food or where not to go and deal with the farmers. So there is an analogy which is like the brain and the dendrites. The number of genes in a banana is more than number of genes in the human, right? I don't know if you know it, but it is the case. But banana is not as intelligent as a human. Do you know why? Because the cells in the brain are connected to each other, and these connections can induce the neighboring cell. And if we can do the same stuff by inducing neighboring farmer, or if we can connect to the trader, if we can connect to the government from the field, then this network of information is going to bring wealth to the farmer, to the nations, to the governments, and to whole as a big ecosystem. So we are at the beginning in the data collection. It comes, as I told you, it comes from satellite. Satellite is a global. We use methodological model. It's a global source. And there is a problem in data collection because in some countries, governments hide their data, especially the methodological data or station data, as if it is a strategic or a golden thing in their hidden rooms, in their servers. If they release this data, a number of startups can flourish and make use of this data to optimize the processes, brings new innovations or new business models. So data is available. Today's technology is capable of doing it, but we want to bring this data to information and then the wisdom all together. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kerem. I'm going to take away the example of the banana. And also your call for perhaps a government to understand that there is a balance between protecting strategic information and spurring growth in the entrepreneurship market for sustainable energy at farm level. So I think we can also kind of look at that way as a suggestion for policymakers. Juliette, perhaps 3 minutes, and then we are going to be in time. 15 minutes left, I think. Okay.
Thank you, Filippo. Yeah, two types of data I'd like to mention. I mean, already highlighted the geospatial data, which is really key to assess demand and especially to understand the type of energy services which should be provided and to size the solution. However, demand assessment is quite challenging, and it because of the availability and the granularity of data, current data versus future prediction is quite complex, and modeling has its limitations. So that's at a pretty high level to plan and to plan this type of intervention. And on the field, one key data is about assessing the willingness to pay from farmers, to assess farmers' affordability and readiness to adopt such system. So field survey, household surveys can capture those aspects, and those will be more crucial to design efficient financing mechanism. I mean, there are many other types of data which are necessary to design such intervention, but I can let the others talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I think I underestimated the overestimated the time we have left. Ojunwa, please, 1.5 minutes, and then Tomas, last but not least again, sorry.
All right, thank you. I think my fellow panelists have mentioned a lot of the data required, especially for risk assessments from an investor's perspective. But one area I would just like to highlight further is around understanding the market size, the customer demographics, willingness and ability to pay. This sometimes you need foot on the ground to be able to assess this data. And the second one is around the seasons, the planting seasons and things around seasonality of the farming activities and how that would impact on revenues and the bottom line. So I think it's important that some of these data, when we gather it, is accessible to multiple people, so beyond just the farmers, but also various investors, because it just makes it easier when this data can be easily accessed. And I'll give a quick example. So in Nigeria, the Rural Electrification Agency is going ahead with the Nigerian Electrification Program with support from the World Bank and the African Development Bank. And what they did was to do a lot of data gathering upfront around the communities that they were going to focus on for this program, with support from donors. But the second thing that was then done is, just as Karim described, is having a platform where you can see most of the data for project planning during implementation and monitoring. So that platform is easy for anyone, whether it's the developers of those energy solutions or whether it's investors looking at those projects, to see what does this project actually entail, who are the customers, what are the parameters in this local environment, what are the potential climate risks, or whatever it is, flooding risks, or those specific local. I think it's important that what governments or programs, when we have big programs within, should access and standardize for use across both project developers, even the farmers, as well as potential investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tomas, would you want to offer your last few words until we get kicked out?
Very briefly, just all this data that was mentioned is really relevant, and not only to assess that, well, if it's made available to the farmer, even combined with business models, for instance, then it indeed increases the profitability of the farmers, because they can make decisions on cooling, for instance, based on life cycle benefits, on the remaining shelf life, real-time market prices. And if their profitability is increased, then it also increases the bankability of these projects, which lowers the financial risk exposure of the investors. So when these projects are then bundled, then the risks are lower. So I think that's really one of the key points I wanted to add, is that these are really highly connected. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I take away this last point on the need to also make the data that we collect through the new technologies to the farmers, because like sustain the demand for energy services at farm level, we need to first show profitability at farm level, and that will eventually translate into bankability. So here, all the issue of the additional discussion on how to bring in the financial sector and to use the traditional tools of project financing, as Sarah has mentioned earlier, comes into play.
Back to the plenary. I hope you had great discussions. I was telling Alois I had the opportunity to peek into all of them, and they seemed incredible, and I understand why they're still discussing. So in a couple of minutes, they should be back. So for now, we have Mr. Mlanga from UNIDO again. He will be moderating the moderators. So as soon as they are here, we're going to welcome Mr. Yonkela, Mrs. Roller, Mr. Dubois, and Mr. Berardi to present their key findings and their reporting of each paper to discussion. So I see some people already logging in. I'm going to leave the floor to you, Alois, and let all of our moderators in when they request it.
Okay, all right. Hi, Monica.
Hello, good to see you.
Same here, same here. Okay, all right. I think one of my questions is answered about group 2. Olivier, bienvenue.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you. I had forgotten to share my screen, so obviously you wouldn't hear me and see me.
Okay.
You did not see me coming, Alois. You were expecting someone else. But
You know, we know that Ranesh is always behind the scene, you know, somewhere.
yeah. Hi, Monica. Hi, Olivier. Good to see you all.
Somehow I'd already got the news that you'll be reporting.
All right, thanks. So we're missing one more person, Filippo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Junckela?
Well, I'm stepping in for Kande, so I think it brings a bit of gender balance into the group. So, but yeah, I'm stepping in for him.
Okay, colleagues, we are ready?
Yeah.
Yes. Good afternoon, colleagues. Morning and evening. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you back to the reporting session. I had, to begin with, I apologize for the fact that my video did not work the first time. We tested it and retested it and retested it. So, but on the last moment, it did not work. I would also want to welcome colleagues who are joining. I think we now have a significant number of participants. I had the opportunity also to join in the group discussions, and I sympathize with the moderators because the depth and the content of the discussions was so fascinating. So I would not want to occupy most of the time, but I would want to invite the moderators to summarize to give us a brief of the discussions in the breakout sessions. But also, in prior to that, I would welcome colleagues to send us questions through the chat box so that we are able to either respond to some of the questions, but also, now during this feedback session, but even after the report from the moderators. That said, I would want to take the opportunity to invite Olivier Dubois from FAO to give us the summary from the discussions in breakout group 1.
Okay.
Olivier.
Thank you, Alois. So I'm Olivier Dubois, and I coordinate FAO's work on energy. So our group had to look at global perspective, and the first question, which countries offer best examples on how to introduce sustainable energy at farm level. And honestly, we had examples from all over the world. Different places. West Africa, East Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, but also different technologies. And I think this summarizes pretty much what we said. There's no one size fits all. It all depends on the circumstances. But basically, we have good examples from all different places, which is good because then you can draw lessons from these good enough examples. And so that's kind of, for me, it was also interesting that some of the technologies such as biogas, they also link to the byproducts. So not looking into silos. This brings me into the second question, which was which strategies have worked best for these success cases. And one thing was what was the Inspira Farm video showed is that you strengthen the farmer by bringing this energy to the farm, so you make their case better. They're in a better position to negotiate with the agribusiness down the chain. One thing which I said is absolutely key is what I mentioned before is the financial hurdles, and this is where there's a big crunch there because we need to absolutely to do a lot of work on this. But there are already very interesting solutions, including you very often you need to start with grants, but for example, revolving funds, pay-go systems, even for biogas recently, but also making a case of the byproduct. Somebody was mentioning, okay, biogas may be expensive, but if you look at the cost, the savings for farmers, that they don't have to buy the fertilizer because they have the biofertilizer from the biogas, then they have a better case. So, and this leads me to the whole issue of not looking in silos, the ag sector being separated from the energy sector, which is unfortunately very often the case. And so you can add value from the business case of energy companies. If the business case of the farmer improves, then he or she can pay for the energy the right price. So this kind of integration between different sectors is absolutely key. Another key topic, which is actually missing, it's not a success, but a strategy of mapping out at the country or subnational level where the links between agriculture and energy. If you don't have energy, you cannot have milling systems, you cannot have proper processing, but even you cannot have proper farm operations. So we mentioned a couple of experiences where these maps exist, but we need to do much more about this. A third question is obviously the whole human resources, the capacity building, the quality control of these systems, and also one aspect that maybe farmers cannot do everything. They can do farming, but they cannot do energy. So if you have, like the biogas system, if you have a biogas system at village level that does the biogas and the farmers do the farming, then that might be another way to move forward, like they are doing actually this in China. The last question was about international collaboration. One thing is that at the field level, at the country level, very often the organizations, they work with others because they have to. They are not supposed to duplicate, and it's an advantage if you can build on other people's work. And so this is happening at the country level, at the project level. You have collaboration, but the water energy food nexus, for example, doesn't happen at the ministerial level, at national level. They happen at initiative level, but also the fact that at higher level, we came to the conclusion that you would need a couple of repositories for all the information that we have about innovative financing schemes, and collect data exactly on the agricultural energy links, on the successful cases. And so we were thinking about international organizations, or whenever SEforALL could become a kind of a repository, maybe with the help of REN and others. I mean, FEO could definitely contribute to that, and others, obviously. But if we want to shift gear, we need a lot more information on these linkages, basically, and on successful experiences. And last but not least, we had a representative of the youth, and it's absolutely key to involve the youth, because there are a lot of opportunities for the youth, but they also can come up with a lot of knowledge, especially on these new technologies, IT technologies, which can really boost innovation on energy agriculture linkage. I think I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot, Olivier. Very much appreciated. Colleagues, it so happens that I did not indicate the time limit aspect.
I was lucky then.
So, Olivier, you were the lucky one. Lucky you, and let me take this opportunity to inform the rest of the presenters that we'll give you around 4 or 5 minutes. I'm sorry for that. So, and Rana, please go in, to present the discussions from breakout session 2.
Great, thanks, Alois. Yeah, we also had a really great discussion in the group. We had representatives from private sector companies working across East Africa, representative of the Alliance for Rural Electrification, Power for All, and also the Selco Foundation. So we really had a wealth of knowledge inside the group, and wish we had slightly more time to explore and discuss further. But what came out is actually the following, and I'll try to make it more like as succinct bullet points. So water is critical. When we talk about farm level interventions, the topic goes beyond just food or energy. Water is also a critical element. Energy and all the sustainable energy technologies can be critical also to help in increasing the agricultural outputs. And there was quite a lot of talk about technologies for improving irrigation, cold storage, particularly after harvest. And then also one thing that was coming out is when we talk about farm level interventions, we're not only talking about agriculture, there's also obviously the animal husbandry part, and there's also quite a significant opportunity to apply some of the sustainable energy technologies in all the sector related to pre-textile like cotton and silk and so on. So there's also quite a significant opportunity there to improve access to energy, not only through the storage, cold storage and irrigation, but also through off-grid applications and solar mini grids. In terms of progress, I think there were quite a few examples, obviously, from countries like Nigeria, Haiti, also in East Africa, and plenty of examples of how the government has really helped in simplifying processes and providing an enabling environment for the private sector to flourish, kind of, and bring those investments. One point as well that came out was that actually when, you know, sometimes to have better stimulation of the demand at the farm level and to make sure that we're capturing where some of these needs are, there's a need to move towards integrated services and common services for the farmers. There, I think the question of the business model remains something that we need to tackle, but then perhaps, you know, working more collaboratively through platforms like the VEF and bringing, I mean, all the different players, private sector, government, multilateral and donors to kind of discuss some of the approaches to resolve that, I think is all key. And finally, collectively, the group came about with a few words that each one of them wanted to also bring here. So I'll try to make those into a meaningful sentence. Basically, we need financial incentive and adequate policy support to ensure and scale, to ensure energy access and scalability. So that's basically the message that the group collectively also wanted to bring back to the plenary. And I pass on over to you.
Thanks, Rana. I mean, very much appreciated. I will not, since we are not doing so well time-wise, let me take the opportunity to invite the moderator from Breakout Group 3, Monica Forella from Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens.
I will try to be, thank you. I will try to be succinct. We were the Enablers Group, and the Enablers Group was composed of FAO, FCDO, the Global Cold Chain Alliance, ANCA, which is a mini-grid Madagascar grassroots level entity, and Shell Foundation. So the main question was, what are the enablers to make the energy transition happen for food systems, and how can that benefit? Lots of information came through, and I try to summarize. Imagine with me a SWOT analysis. So the strengths, the threats, the weaknesses, and the opportunities. I will focus only on the weaknesses that we see and on the opportunities that we identified. The weaknesses in bullet point form are, we are focused on, unfortunately, lack of finance. We have a lack of dialogue between the agricultural and the energy experts at country level. Furthermore, we have a difficulty with capacity building also of entrepreneurs. And above all that, women and youth are not involved enough in the sectors. We have lack of access of technology. We don't yet know about the importance of cold chain probably well enough. And a lack of mechanization was also mentioned. And all of that, unfortunately, in the policy framework, that is also yet insufficient. So here we have the weaknesses. But the bigger the weaknesses are, the bigger the business opportunity is. And hence, let me go to the enabling opportunities. Definitely, we agreed that we have to see all of that in a context. The context matters, and it's different from geography to geography. We also said that the full value chain approach has to be taken into consideration. We were introduced to a concept of the three-legged stool. And as it's very catchy, let me talk about the three-legged stool. It's the three-legged stool of we need training, we need technology, and we need finance. And these are sort of key components. So how do we get there? The recommendations are the following. We have to align interest. We have to slice and dice the markets, and we have to recognize that margins matter, which means that agribusiness needs to work with energy business. We need to align the interests. Secondly, we need to recognize that women farmers carry the brunt of the burden. We need to incentivize and to reduce the burden for women, also in mechanical farming. Third, we need to bridge the gap between energy and agricultural finance. And again, it was underlined, women need to be supported, SMEs need to be supported, and youth needs to be supported. One way to do that is associations, so grouping them. Another way to do that is sharing on knowledge platforms. And another, definitely what has been mentioned, another big component of all of that is that we are talking about, yes, finance, technology, and training in the context of exactly the geographical particularities and the country-wise particularities. So the key words that I want to leave you with is opportunities in financing, opportunities in dialogue, opportunities in training, opportunities in capacity building of women and youth, ! Knowledge sharing, and boosting technology. Thank you very much.
Alois.
Monica, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I got, I'm quite inspired by the three proposals: training, technology, and financing. Filippo, from the fourth breakout group, Filippo is the coordinator of climate change at the Global Environment Facility. Filippo.
How much time do I have left, Alois? Tell me.
1 minute. No. I mean, 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to sort of do as good of a job as the other moderators did. I had the privilege to manage to moderate a super interesting discussion. We had colleagues from IFAD, we had colleagues from the World Bank and PFAN, and from the BASE Sustainable Energy Agency in Basel, as well as the entrepreneur Kerem Erichki, who shared with us some perspective from a really from sort of on the ground work with his startups. The discussion was around two key questions. The first one being around opportunities and barriers for scaling up sustainable energy at farm level. And then the second one was very much about needs, about data needs and data availability. On the first question, a few key points that I got. The first one was that there hasn't been enough work on the demand side. We've done a lot of work on the supply side, but a lot more attention needs to be put in stimulating demand from farmers. And a few things that are needed there are demand assessment. So data is key. Demand stimulation through training programs, promotion of high energy efficiency appliances for the users, and of course the fourth being the quality of supply of the energy equipment. A second block of discussion that we had was about financial barriers. And here we heard about the usual suspects of the issue of upfront cost and how project preparation is key, including with support from the donors community to enable both farmers to become aware of the opportunities and financial consultants and energy services providers to structure projects that make sense from a financial risk of return perspective. So this is traditional project finance principles, and you know, profits needs to be there. So something that helps in that sense is standardization of these assessments, and on the transaction side, of course, the issue of bundling of demand into larger schemes that are attractive for larger financiers is obviously key as well. From Kerem, we heard that you know, there's really, from a farmer's standpoint, the most important thing is the short-term decision making. So is this going to be more profitable than buying additional kettles? So we really have to come up with business models that help spreading the increase or additional upfront cost of sustainable energy technology over time, so that we kind of really overcome that barrier of the financial cost upfront. One suggestion was obviously structuring sustainable energy systems as energy as a service rather than using traditional ownership methods. Moving on to the data discussion, here some data needs that have been highlighted are obviously those related to the ability to pay of these customers. So the issue of how do we segment demand, and what information can we offer about credit status of these customers to financiers that are really trying to assess their risk when they pour money in this sector. Additional data needs around energy consumption, around income data, obviously everything that is related to climate risk, so environmental, social, weather information. And we've heard about some of the data that are right now available, a lot around satellite data. Some concern that in some countries the information about weather and satellite are not freely available, and so there's some level of balance for the policymaker between protecting safety and security of the data, but also allowing for the private sector, especially in the digital revolution space applied to farm and energy systems, to make the most of the data that are available but not always accessible. So I think I will stop there. Last on data, I think it was interesting. Kerem again mentioned this continuum between data and the need to transform data in usable information, and for this information eventually to become wisdom at the farm level.
Thanks a lot, Filippo. And I will try to use the remaining 2 minutes, if we are still allowed, to crystallize or to pick up some of the ideas that I heard from the moderators. Like I said, I grew up on a farm myself, and any decision on a farm has to do with the simple question: does it make economic sense for me? So everything we have to discuss in terms of making these sustainable energy solutions available to the farm, it also has to be included that the person who is going to make the decision is the farmer, and their calculus is about profitability. Filippo, thanks a lot about stimulating demand. We have seen a lot of work on supply side, but we end up with a lot of infrastructure being invested into supply electricity, but no demand. So if we are going to make sure that, we also provide sustainable energy into the food systems, we need to create the demand through technologies, and providing looking at the innovations to make sure that the technology is available either directly or through various support infrastructure. I like Monica's presentation: full value chain approach, training, technology, and finance. and gender. This is very important, and youth. Rana, thanks a lot for mentioning that water is critical. From my own personal experience, the day we had access to solar water pumping systems, it revolutionized the way we operate as a farm. So, and water has an energy implication. So access to water is also very important. My colleague from FAO mentioned the issue of international collaboration. We have a lot of lessons learned. We have a lot of case studies of things that have worked, approaches and business models that have worked. We need to learn from this in developing new approaches. Let me take the opportunity to thank you. Sorry, this was my shortest summary. Thank you for the excellent conversations. I had the opportunity to visit the different panel discussions and to capture this and feed this into our report towards the end.